So we have a very full schedule and agenda.
Recording in progress.
Good evening. I would like to call to order the December 22nd ACSD board meeting to order. We do have a quorum, so at this point in time, I'd like to do introductions. And Ron, we're going to start with you.
Ron Meckler.
Mary Heather Noble.
Steve Cash.
Laura Harthan.
Ellen Whelan-Weist.
Steve Orzak.
Wendy Baker.
Barbara Wilson.
Nava Glickman. Taryn Bruce.
Jamie McCallum.
And online,
Ellie Rom.
Jason Chance.
and I see you, Suzanne.
Suzanne Buck.
Okay, great. And administrators in the room.
Nellie Plaza. Courtney Cron.
Matt Currency, Director of Finance and Operations.
And that includes principals.
Jenny Irving.
Gail Wizzle.
Jen Kravitz.
Sean Marcells.
Caitlin Steele.
Okay, thank you so much.
We also have a number of our nursing staff here tonight.
Okay, so let's do it.
Kelly McGovern, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, Kelly McGovern,
Hi, Kelly.
MUHS nurse.
Hazel Jones, nurse for Salisbury, Cornwall, Goodton.
Dane Jarrett, Farm, Woodbridge, and Pittsburgh.
And we have guests, so we might as well just introduce our guest as well. Nicole?
I'm Nicole McTavish. I'm the superintendent and director at the Hannaford Career Center.
Austin Haynes, I'm the business manager at the Hannaford Career Center.
And I'm David Roberts, I'm the Director of Operations at the Hannaford Career Center.
Okay, thank you so much. At this time, if I could have a motion to adopt our agenda.
Moved.
I'm sorry, do we not have public comment first before that?
We do public comment after.
Sorry, I wasn't looking at the
I'm
actual
glad
agenda.
you do this too. Thank you for doing that. Motion to adopt our agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion, changes? Okay. Seeing none. All those in favor of adopting the agenda as warned, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any noes? Assumption or abstentions. Any noes? Not to accept the agenda? Any abstentions? Okay. The agenda has been approved. First up is our first public comment period. And as we go into public comments, I just want to remind folks that we are very happy to have public comments. We do request that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And there will be folks, if there are folks online, we kind of alternate between the Zoom link and also those that are in the room. And without saying, you know, we don't accept comments that are specific to students and parents and that kind of thing. So with that said, is there any public comments? Anyone that would like to make a public comment in the room? Okay.
Yep.
And if you could state your name.
Sure. I'm Kelly McGovern,
Okay.
and I am the ACSD nurse leader and a school nurse at MUHS. I'm in my 10th year here. And I'm also the immediate past president of the Vermont State School Nurses Association. I'm going to hopefully get through my thoughts in the 3 minutes, but if I don't, I'll share this statement with the board. I want to thank you all for your extraordinarily difficult work in supporting our school community, students, staff, families, and taxpayers alike, as you work on a budget for fiscal year 2027. It's my understanding that the proposed budget includes a recommendation to reduce nursing services to our rural elementary schools by 0.3 FTEs. In preparation for this decision-making around school health services, I wanted to share some information and thoughts that may be helpful as you consider the value of your investment in nursing services. Bless you. School nurses play a critical role in supporting the health, wellness, and academic success of students. They address critical healthcare needs, ensuring that students can thrive in the classroom and beyond. The challenges students face today, from chronic illnesses to mental health struggles, demand comprehensive, accessible care, which school nurses uniquely provide. With over 25% of students managing chronic conditions such as asthma, diabetes, and seizure disorders, the presence of a school nurse ensures these children can thrive in a safe and supportive environment. Studies have shown that schools with full-time school nurses see lower rates of absenteeism, higher graduation rates, and fewer illness-related early dismissals. School nurses are often the first line of defense for physical and mental health needs. If a child comes to school without their basic needs being met, we're often the first to be approached or brought in to assist with the situation. We are often the only medical professional a child will see if they're sick. Studies show that when a licensed school nurse sees a student in the health office, almost 95% of the time the student returns to class to continue learning. Without a school nurse, 11 to 15% of students who visit the office are sent home, leading to a loss of learning for students and potential loss of wages for caregivers. Without a school nurse present, teachers and staff spend just over 26 minutes a day attending to health concerns, taking away from valuable teaching time. With a school nurse present, this time is reduced to 6 minutes a day. In a study conducted in Massachusetts, researchers found that for every dollar invested in school health, the community saved $2.20 in medical cost and lost productivity for parents and caregivers and teachers. The Vermont State School Nurses Association has been working closely with the Agency of Education to work towards updating the education quality standards to reflect staffing needs based on an acuity model rather than a student-to-nurse ratio based on numbers alone. Sorry. All of our schools have students with chronic health conditions requiring nursing interventions on a daily basis. These conditions include, but are not limited to, type 1 diabetes, asthma, seizure disorders, heart conditions, and life-threatening allergies. School nurses also manage and administer daily medications to students for conditions that can affect learning, such as ADHD, anxiety, and depression. When leadership considers staffing based on student health needs rather than ratios or school size.
Like 10 seconds.
Oh, gosh, okay. Students, families, and staff receive improved care and services, supporting our district-wide focus of safe and healthy schools and our current strategic plan to support equity. Of note, our neighboring Addison County school districts have at least one full-time school nurse at all of their schools.
Thank you.
I did have more to share, but again, I'll share this statement with the board via email, and I have copies here. So,
Thank you.
and my
Thank
colleagues
you.
will
Thank you.
also follow up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone online joining us this evening from Zoom who would like to make a public comment? If so, please raise your Zoom hand.
Okay, Leanne.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the room would like to make a public comment?
As I said before, I'm Danny Jarr. I'm the school nurse at Weybridge, Shoreham, and Bridport. And I really appreciate this opportunity to talk more about our school nursing. I did send you guys a letter about my statement, so this is kind of just like a summarized overall comment for the public forum. And I just wanted to really talk about the health needs of each school, which are unique to each student population and can rapidly change throughout a school year as a new diagnosis come to light. In the 3 schools I work at, I provide nursing care for life-threatening allergies, major health conditions, including cardiac anomalies, controlled medications, and a high prevalence of chronic conditions such as asthma, as Kelly also talked about. Nurses and health designees document into confidential electronic health records for every health visit, including medication administration, health screenings, and for every case management. For our last year, the 24-25 school year, there was 975 health entries for Weybridge, 1,413 for Bridport, and 1,460 for Shoreham. In addition to daily care, nurses also play a pivotal role in the prevention and mitigation of emergencies. There have been 16 emergencies I have cared for over the span of 5 years. For our student emergencies, only 2 had had a medical diagnosis prior to that emergency. Under registered nurses' supervision and license, health designees can provide daily care, but not only are not able to assess students, they're not able to delegate nursing tasks, and they're not able to provide skilled nursing care. The State Board of Nursing states, delegation of care to health designees can only occur if a nurse is accessible and provides supervision. If a nurse is only working 3 or 4 days a week, then when there is no nurse supervision on the days a nurse is not working, a health designee cannot provide care. The role and benefits of a school nurse are vast and necessary. I urge the board not to make any cuts to nursing staff or to any position for that matter for the next budget. Students must be healthy to be educated and educated to be healthy. Thanks for your time.
Anyone on Zoom? Please raise your Zoom hand. Anyone in the room? Go ahead, if you could state your name, please.
My name is Hazel Jones, and I'm the current president of the Vermont State School Nurses Association. I'm also a school nurse here in the district for Salisbury, Ripton, and Cornwall students. One of the responsibilities of the state association is to advise on matters that have a critical bearing on professional practice in relation to nursing standards, laws, and regulations. Not having a school nurse on duty is one such situation. During the last board meeting, Matt stated best practice and the strategic plan as contributing factors in developing budget allocations, rather than numbers alone. NASN considers having a full-time school nurse in each building as best practice. ACSD only supplies full-time school nurses in 3 out of 9 campuses and splits the 5 rural elementaries between 2 school nurses, capping on-campus nursing service to half-time or less, thus already not meeting best practice. Cutting nursing care even further is not a best practice standard referenced by Matt. As for the district strategic plan, Goal 2 provides for equitable access to needed resources and infrastructure that supports all students. Chronic health care conditions reside in all schools, regardless of student enrollment numbers, as do emergency situations. Without access to a school nurse on campus or a minimum available for consultation, equity does not exist and these students suffer. Cutting school nurse hours also goes against the district's wellness policy. As stated in Goal 2 of that policy, the district will follow the Standards of Practice School Health Services Manual. The manual's introduction reminds the district of state law requiring a licensed school nurse to direct, supervise, and delegate nursing care provided by others. It also states that the district must provide the nurse with adequate staffing for the safe delegation. If there is a day and a half per week without the school nurse scheduled to work, there is not adequate staffing. In fact, no delegation may take place without the nurse at least available to supervise by phone. The Vermont Board of Nursing regulates the practice of nursing in the state and provides an 11-step delegation tree that nurses must follow. Delegation requires ongoing supervision by the nurse. So in this specific case, students at Weybridge Elementary and Bridport Shoreham Elementary would be without care for a day and a half each week if nursing services decreased by 0.3 full-time equivalents. As school nurses monetarily, as Kelly stated, school nurses monetarily benefit the community more than double their expense. They free up over 3 hours of work time for other employees per day and generate Medicaid payments to school districts through billable services. And with Vermont now expanding those billable services, revenue generated by school nurses will increase exponentially. Our 3 overviews tonight merely touch the proverbial tip of the iceberg of school health services. So much more lies below the surface, and I gladly offer my services in supplying the school board with any needed data on the benefits of maintaining access to a school nurse every day. Thank you.
Okay, any other public comments? They're online or in the room. Okay, thank you. Next up, we have a recommendation to approve the minutes for December 8th, 2025. And you'll notice in your board materials, there were some revised minutes from May 27, 2025. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes and the revised minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes as warned for December 8th and approve the revised minutes for the May 27th.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and call the question. All those in favor of approving the minutes for December 8th and the revised minutes for May 27th, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the minutes have been approved.
And Trisha Allen, I think, is joined online.
Okay, great. Thank you. Is she
She a panelist?
does she need to move over?
That I don't know.
No, I've been moved over. We're good.
Awesome, awesome. Next on the agenda is approval of the ACSD bills, and Jason, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Okay. Suzanne and I reviewed the bills today. We had 2 warrants. General fund warrant dated December 19th for $813,954.59, and a payroll warrant dated December 10th for $1,015,371,003. We had no questions that went unanswered, so I move that we approve the bills as read.
And can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Any questions, any discussion on the bills?
We're a half mile from the airport.
Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of approving the bills as reported by Jason, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any noes? I'm having a hard time tonight. Seeing none, the bills have been approved. Next up is report of the student representatives. And they're both here, so welcome.
Yes. So we have recently completed our visit to Salisbury School, and which was a successful visit, as I talked about in one of our previous meetings. And we are in the process of reaching out to Bridport and Shoreham schools to finalize some meeting dates there. And that's our update on our school visits.
Thank you.
And then on a comment, commenting on the public comments, me and Nava, on the behalf of both of us, believe that full-time school nurses are very beneficial throughout our school day, providing services not only for allergies or asthma, all that stuff that I personally have dealt with, but just day-to-day stuff.
Okay. And then going on top of that, so other stuff that I've been working on through the Vermont Learners Association. Okay, before I go into this, how many people kind of are aware that that is a thing that's happening? Okay, so I'll give a little information. So there's a senior at CVU, her name is Zoe Epstein, and she is working on something called the Vermont Learners Association, and she's put a lot of time and care into this. It's really impressive, of connecting juniors and seniors who are student representatives all across the state, kind of to create more unified student voice and really just get students involved in the decisions that are, in the end, actually impacting us. And so we've been doing a lot of work recently, obviously, as budget developments have been developing, on just sharing what different kind of perspectives statewide is happening, and then also just sharing the actual information from each of our different board meetings, budget presentations, so that we can all kind of get a good idea. So I have some stuff to share about that. But another thing that the VLA is working on as well is getting is working on getting voting access to student representatives, at least one or both of them. So that would be really cool, and I'd be interested to hear your feedback on it. I think one of the two things that they're working on in terms of changing it on a state level on what student representatives as a role can do, or working individually with boards, but the idea is that it would either be you have a vote and you vote before everyone else, and your vote doesn't actually contribute to the entire group, but it's more a chance to share your opinion on the matter, or you actually are a voting member, deciding member of the board. So that's something that's going on, and I'm happy to share what I know about that afterwards. But then going back to the budget stuff, kind of what we've all shared from our meetings together and what all the student representatives across the state
have been talking about is really like kind of a lack of community and specifically like in our schools, like an understanding about what's going on in the budget and what it means. And I'll be honest, like even me, like sitting here, I go to these board meetings and I see the slideshows, and I mean, honestly, it's like really hard to understand and really confusing. I'm sure some of the adults in the room still look at these presentations. Yes. Oh, okay, perfect. Yes. So it's hard, and I think we're trying to work out like how can we convey that information to students, because it's the stuff that's impacting us. It's the stuff that impacts our families, our parents like worry about it and have opinions on it. And another concern is that like this idea of depoliticization, which is like when the community gets separated from the people who are actually making the decisions, and then what you end up with is community members who don't care about the property budget or property taxes and aren't making decisions maybe with the interest of seeing how it's going to actually impact students, but focusing more on numbers. So I think like, yeah, finding what we've talked a lot about is like, how do we engage the community? How do we essentially dumb this down so everyone can understand? Because students want to know what's going on. So yeah, how do you like speak our language and make this information more accessible? And so that's kind of budget stuff. And then lastly, I just do want to say I love the school nurse, and I go to Kelly all the time. She sees me every day, and just because I make tea in there every day. But it really is like nursing and our nursing services in our school is not just something that people go to for like physical health concerns, but you know, in the same way that the guidance office offers like just a safe space and a positive resource in our school, so does the nursing center, and so do our nurses, and they are definitely an important part of our school. So hearing all them say that nice stuff, I just wanted to share that they are an important part of our school.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for either of our reps? Okay, and if, you know, believe me, I would love to work together on how to make the budget. We had a training this morning, and it's hard stuff, right? And so getting it to the point where it's easier for folks to understand would be wonderful. So we'll have to talk. Okay, excellent. Thank you guys, appreciate it. Next is our Hannaford Career Center budget presentation, which I'm going to turn it over to Nicole. And just before you start, I've allocated 20 minutes, so you have a lot of slides. So I can make it work. Okay, you can make it work. So maybe you want to start with some of the financials. We don't want to miss that. And, okay, thank you so much.
All right, 20 minutes. Here we go.
Could we make Nicole a presenter so I can share the screen?
Yeah.
Me too. Nicole McTavish.
The DHA, PAHCC.
That's us, yep.
Yeah.
There we go.
This round.
I requested to share.
So I'm going to, my name is Nicole McTavish. I'm the superintendent and the director at the Patricia A. Hannaford Regional Technical School District, which we around here call the Hannaford Career Center. I'm going to kind of gloss over some of the information about what we are and who we do, given the time constraint. But I also know that oftentimes we have new board members in the room that might have questions, so please feel free to ask. So just briefly about us, the way that we are organized is we serve the students, mostly the students of Addison County. So we serve 4 different school districts, and we were We were originally founded in 1971, but we had a major renovation and are now in 3 campuses, which I'm going to talk about a little bit as we go forward. So I'll kind of skip that, but there is a picture here. So our services are kind of spread out across the county. We have our main building, which is here connected to Middlebury High School. But then we also have a north campus out on Manelli Road where we house our diesel program, our auto program, and our agriculture program. And then we have a satellite program, which is embedded actually inside of Virgins High School, where we do a number of pre-technical classes, which are mostly freshmen and sophomores, but some juniors there too. So, talking about why the Hannaford Center is so important. It's important to our community, it's important to our kids, and I think it's also critical to our economic development here in Addison County. We all have been following the statistics, mostly on the healthcare front, but also on the education front of how Vermont is aging. So within 4 years, 1 in 3 Vermonters are going to be over 60. And many of Vermonters are aging out or retiring out of industry, out of labor, out of the trades. And we are not producing enough students to backfill those critical positions. Anybody who has had to find a plumber or an electrician or any of the trades, you know how this is challenging and problematic, or a nurse or any sort of medical person in our county. So what we are doing is we are trying to ensure that students and adult learners are able to access high wage, high demand, high skill jobs. And they do that through, we partner with your sending school district, so with Middlebury, with Virgins, and with Mount Abe School District, and some others as well. When I was here last year, I talked a little bit about how CTE is having a moment. It's having a moment not only in Addison County and in Vermont, but across the nation. Young people are really starting to take a look at the cost of a 4-year college education or a master's degree or a doctorate, weighed against the time that takes and weighed against the outcome of salary that they would earn on the back end. So there's a lot of really thoughtful calculus going into what I want to do with my life, how much debt I want to go into, and how fast I want to get into my career. And a lot of thoughtful consideration about what is my passion, what do I really want to do, how do I want to spend my life. And that is translating into really different outcomes at post-secondary institutions and in high school and adult programs that are training the trades. One of the things that we're charged with in career technical education is ensuring that our jobs that we are training for align with the data from our area and from our state and from the nation. So all the programs that we put together, we work really hard to align them with what Addison County needs, what the state of Vermont needs, and what we need across the nation. And we're really heartened every year because the McClure Foundation puts out this fantastic document that's all the top jobs in Vermont, and our programs are very well aligned with those. So we feel really good about the fact that our kids are graduating into careers that are important in the community. We also like to try to set the context for our budget before we get to the main event. If you add all of the public school education budgets in all of Addison County, last year it totaled just under $125 million. And of that $125 million spent on public education in Addison County, we account for less than 5% of that budget. But we do serve 1 in 3 high school students in Addison County, as well as hundreds of adult learners each year. So we feel like we're a pretty good bang for your buck. We also really, we find it really important that when students are graduating from us, they're graduating with not only their high school diploma, they're also graduating with industry recognized credentials. So those are the same exact credentials that adults in the real world earn. They're graduating generally with some college credits or some college experience, and they're almost for sure graduating with workplace experience in their chosen field. So that gives them not only a leg up on their high school diploma, it also gives them a leg up on their experience in the work world if they want to go into the career field right out of high school. Or as they're paying for college, if they're working in industry, it gives them a higher wage when they enter that field. And partnering with all of the high schools that we partner with, we see really good graduation rates. So last year our graduation rate was 98% at the Hannaford Career Center, which is just slightly above all of Vermont CTE. In general, CTE students do graduate at higher rates and higher than the 82% in Vermont in general. So we talked a little bit about the economic imperative. The economic imperative is for students to make sure that they're graduating into high wage, high skill, high demand jobs. And also that our county, our state, and our nation are having very well-trained people going into industry to make sure that we all have those folks in order to do the jobs that we all rely on, that you can't outsource and that AI can't do. So who we serve. Right now, you can see each of those dots is where a CTE is in the state of Vermont. And we serve Addison County and beyond. We serve every year a handful from Otter Valley and even some from Chittenden County and some from as far south as southern Rutland. We have about 350 kids each year that we serve. It kind of varies from year to year, but around 350. And we serve 9th and 10th grade students in our pre-technical programs, and we serve 11th and 12th graders in our technical programs. We also have hundreds of students that go through our adult programs every year, mostly in the medical fields. And again, our focus is high wage, high skill, high demand jobs. One of the things that people don't often know is that we do a really good job serving populations, special populations. So of our center, 39% of our students right now are on IEPs or 504s, as compared to 22% of the sending school districts in aggregate, 20% in Vermont and 15% in the nation. So we're graduating students at that higher rate who are often on an IEP or a 504. So what programs do we have? Well, we have 24 programs, and you can see there on the slide our different pre-technical programs. So ag, STEM, mechanical science, visual communications, animal science, engineering and architecture, power equipment, entrepreneurship, small business, STEM and trade skills. That's for our 9th and 10th graders. And then our technical programs, and those are the programs that are every day for half a day. You can see that we've got the ART, the theater program, manufacturing, auto, construction, culinary, design and illustration, diesel, education, electrical, which will be, fingers crossed, new next year. We're waiting for our AOE approval, medical professions, natural resources, ag, and welding and fabrication. And that was new last year. The other thing is our work-based learning program. So a really critical part for students is not only training in the school with hands-on with their equipment and learning all the skills, but going into industry and then applying those skills in a real workplace. And our students get the opportunity to do that, especially in their junior and senior years. So the work-based learning, these are our stats, and you can see that from last year, which is the light blue, to this year, which is the dark blue, we're already exceeding what we did last year, and we're only halfway through this year. And this is due to our amazing new work-based learning coordinator. Her name is Jess Daniel, and we are just thrilled to have her. She is getting out there and getting partnerships that our students can go straight to work in. And these are some of the partners that we have right now. We like to try to take just a minute and highlight our partner with Porter Medical and the University of Vermont Medical. And that is because this is a huge focus for Addison County. It's one of the highest needs areas, medical professions all across the state of Vermont, due in large to our aging population. And it is always a challenge to find, hire, and keep medical professionals. And Porter and UVM have given our students the kind of access which I have never seen before. Our students are in the OR, our students are seeing babies born, our students are working with geriatric patients, our students are seeing and doing skills that are pretty amazing given their age and experience levels. And then the other piece, which is often overlooked that we do, is adult education. So one of our missions, one of our things that we have to do is to ensure that we are upskilling and retraining adults in our community. So right now we really have a lot of programming in the healthcare industry. So we have LNA, CCMA, and phlebotomy techs. In fact, right now the phlebotomy techs are over there doing sticking their first sticks tonight, so that's kind of fun. And then we also do small trades. We're doing a brand new partnership with Middlebury College where we're upskilling their food service industry so that those folks can get higher wages. And we're developing a neuromuscular massage program and a food as science program. And this is all due to our new adult education coordinator, Roger, who is doing an amazing job too. We're really very lucky. So enrollment and capacity is where I want to spend just a few minutes. So right now, our fall count, we had 377 students. So that's almost exactly 1/3 of all the high school students in Addison County. But our facility can hold over 200 more students. When you look at that, and then you look at Stafford Technical, who is to our south, they are bound by their physical campus. They cannot take more kids. So for 278 seats, they just had 447 applications. Then you look at Chittenden County, who has 7,000 students in their catchment area, and they can serve less than 10% of those. Yet here we are with excess capacity. Just to the north and to the south, not even in the whole rest of the state, but just in Chittenden County and Rutland County, there are 131 students on their wait lists. Those are students who got admitted, but there is not room for them. So if we could serve even half of those, I'm going to talk about this in just a little bit, it would make a huge difference to the cost of our tuition and to our taxpayers. So right now, this is our current enrollment. So our current enrollment, obviously, Middlebury has the highest. You're the largest school and also contiguous with us. Then Virgins, Mount Abe, and other. And then last year, this group specifically asked about what our enrollment in our different programs were. So I thought I would bring those numbers this year so you'd have those up front. So these are our technical programs, and then the next slide is our pre-technical. And then next slide. So this is the impact that it would have if we served even half of the kids on the waiting list to our north and our south, even half of them. It would drive our tuition down by $14,000 per kid. It would be a reduction of 34%. And that's just serving kids who have already been admitted, who there just isn't a seat for. This isn't even serving kids who were turned away, or kids who might want to come for specialty programming that we have. We have one of the only diesel programs in the state and the only ART program. So one of the things that people always ask is why is your tuition so high, right? And the answer for us is bonds and boundaries. So I just talked about the boundary issue. Our catchment area is what it's called. Our service area was created many years ago when demographics looked a lot different than they do now. Rutland was smaller, we were bigger, things were different. And so at this point, one of the things that we're really asking the legislature for is to take a look at these catchment areas and how realistic they are still today. The other piece is our bond debt. So when we remodeled our main campus, it was an $8.1 million bond, and we have a tiny little budget. So $8.1 million of debt with a tiny budget gives us a lot of bond debt over time. And then we also had a $1.6 million North Campus budget, which we're now paying off. Yay! But depending on the year, depending on the budget, the bond debt alone can account for up to 20% of our budget. And then the boundary issue we just talked about. So in our catchment area, we only have 1,100 high school students. Stafford's catchment area has 2,100 high school students, and Chittenden County has 7,000 high school students. So talking about realigning those boundaries could make a big difference for access for kids. Many more kids could access CTE, and would make a very big difference in our tuition. In fact, we would be literally in the middle of the pack if that were the case. So again, we are positioned for growth, and we are geographically positioned so that we could be a CTE hub. What has to change is the service regions, and that's a legislative thing. So, the budget. So this is our fiscal year 26 budget. You've seen it, it's in your packet. The next slide is our fiscal year 27 budget. So you can see that the pieces of the pie, which are really big, are not shocking. They are the same pieces of the pie, which are really big for you. So the light blue is our salary. The darker blue is our benefits, and then the orange is our debt service. The debt service may be something that is not reflected in your budget, but is a huge part of our budget. So from last year's to this year's, we're looking at a 9.95% increase. And that is due to many of the same things which you are facing. And then also for us, our North Campus roof is failing, and we have to replace it. And that is not something that a small budget like ours has enough in reserve to cover. So we have to include that in our budget. So negotiated salary increases, I think ours were very similar to yours over the last 3-year increases. The rising health insurance is something that is just staggering, and I have a slide on that I'll get to. The facilities improvement, the new campus, the new roof on our North Campus building is, you have to have a roof, and so this is included in our budget. And our air handlers, they're called energy recovery units. CTE, diesel, and auto in particular are very hard on those units, and they don't last as long in a CTE environment as they do in a regular ed environment. And it's been how many years? 20 years? 20 years. We have to replace them now. And then our bond debt payment. So this might be interesting for you as you think about your budgets too. I could not get over the staggering increases in healthcare. I mean, I knew it intellectually, but until I saw it in numbers, I was really shocked. So for us, from fiscal year 24 to 27, it's been a 48% increase. And right now it's 30% of our total salaries. So when we're hiring, it's probably very similar for you. But the thing that just really kind of knocked me off my chair was the gold plan, which almost everybody takes, for us anyway, has gone from $17,000 to $41,000 since fiscal year 18. That is just crazy. And when you have 80% of your budget, which is in salary and benefits, this is a major driver. So this is the piece I was talking about for the North Campus roof and the energy. We used to call them HVAC systems. Now they're called the other thing, energy recovery units. And then our salary and our debt obligation. Our salaries this year went up 6%. It was 9% before and 6% before that, and that compounds over time, just as yours do. And then the bond debt right now is just over 12% of our budget. So our preliminary tuition rate it goes up just a little bit more than the actual budget increase. So the preliminary tuition, and this all depends on, it will be tweaked over time, but it's going to be right around 10-11%, which is probably not surprising. The other thing which contributes to what you feel and what is a little bit frustrating is this base rate issue. And we haven't quite recovered from last year when we had a negative base rate increase for the first time. We still don't know why that's the case. But this year they have at least given us a positive one, but we certainly are not on the trajectory that we used to be. And that does make it feel like a greater tuition increase. And then it's always fun, I think, to just see some of the PAC voices, some of the graduates. We have 2 graduates in the room. I just learned that we have a nurse here that's a graduate from our medical professions program, and Drew is a graduate from our videography program. So we run into folks all the time in the community who are PAC graduates. And I hit it?
You did good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I would love to answer questions.
Questions, folks, to Nicole. Jamie.
Thank you so much, as always, for this is a great presentation. When you were talking about the catchment zones, you said it's a legislative. So can you say a little bit more about how that works and what a potential change to that would require?
So it's actually written into statute which each of our CTE centers, the towns we serve. And so the change that would have to be made would either change the system, right, so that it's not done by service area, so that it was just students could go where they wanted, or it would be that they were realigned to have the population, the resident high school population, aligned more with the seats available in the centers. Either one of those would provide relief for Addison County.
I see. So there is no, how should I say this, Patricia, PAC board or other CTE centers boards that have a say in that question?
No.
Interesting.
No.
Okay.
Although students are allowed to come to us, but in practice it just doesn't happen.
Oh.
Yeah. Right now, already in statute, any student can go to any CTE center.
Oh.
They're allowed to. However, I can tell you we have maybe 5 out of 300 and over over 350. It just doesn't happen.
That's usually limited to when their center doesn't have the programming or when they can't get in the transportation. Who provides the transportation? What does that look like? It's a challenge.
I see.
And you can understand, right? Because in the current system, the money follows the child. So if a student leaves Addison County, for example, and went to Chittenden County, for example, that tuition money would follow them. So there's a disincentive.
Right. I see. Thank you.
I was curious if, like, with what you were talking about students, from Rutland and then down below us or above us, being able to come here and because there's not spots there and there are here, thinking about like specific interest, has there been discussions about like adding more programs onto the Career Center that are kind of gonna like expand and meet the demand of those students?
That's a great question. In fact, that's exactly what we do. We're limited to adding one program a year. So last year, based on student demand and labor data, we added welding. And this year, based on student demand and labor data, we're hoping to add electrical. We built it all out. We're just waiting for the thumbs up from the Agency of Education at this point. Yeah, good question.
Yes.
Two questions on the catchment areas, Nicole. One is, I think I saw in the slides, but I don't know if I heard you say that you feel like it would be within the Hannaford Career Center's ability to provide transportation to students from other catchment areas if they were to be redefined.
Yes.
So that feels manageable from Chittenden or Stafford to I assume that's busing, essentially.
Right. I mean, you kind of need a little group so that you can send a small bus. We are in the process of revamping our transportation fleet, which is pretty decrepit. But over the last 2 years, we've been able to replace. We won a grant for 2 vans, and then we just replaced our 2 short buses. It definitely pays off to go get a little group of students and bring them down. The transportation right now, the way that it is written into the law, is that it must be provided in your own service region, and it can be provided outside of your service region. So we ran the numbers, and it's definitely doable for us to provide transportation if we have students who want to come.
And I had another question about if you have any reading of the tea leaves or any sense of kind of how the legislature is receiving this. I assume that we're not the only CTE that might have this dilemma, or that other CTEs that would like to serve more students than they have the capacity for might be interested in this too. But do you have a read on legislative discussions at this point, or is it going to be a whole new issue for them?
Every legislator I have talked to and shown, I have a little like talking points document with some graphs and these same numbers I just showed you. Everybody to a person is like, well, this is kind of a no-brainer. However, the level of change which may or may not be coming, right, is a complete unknown, I feel like, especially in the CTE world. There's still, the governor is still hoping to have us all be one CTE district across the state of Vermont. The CTE centers themselves are sort of split on that decision. I could not guess, and I've talked to people who you would think would be able to guess, and they can't guess either. So I don't know where it's going to land. My hope, my number one thing that I'm talking to every single legislator about is this issue. It's our number one issue, is this servicing area, because it's so critical for Vermont to have more people going into the trades. It's so critical for kids to have, if only 50% of our kids are going on to college, and if they're going to stay in Vermont, I want them to have a high wage, high skill, high demand job. And any kid that's touching CTE, we're also helping with the graduation rates of our sending school districts. So it's a win all around. More students having more access to more CTE is a win. So
it's also an example of how a technical change can reduce education spending,
right?
Very specifically, and so it would be nice to have that come to the forefront in this legislative session. Mary Heather.
Yeah, I want to follow up on what you were saying. I'm curious, for those districts that have really high spending, I'm wondering if there is a relationship between the capacity of their assigned CTE centers, and if there's more seats than there are students, obviously the tuition is going to be much higher, which then impacts those districts' tuition. So I just wonder if that's a conversation that you've heard happening.
It is, and the other CTE centers, which have the higher tuition levels, are kind of in the same boat with us. And it's challenging because our costs are they're pretty fixed. I could take 200 more students tomorrow with not any additional cost except for supplies.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of, we're right at that tipping point.
Yeah.
And so this kind of a change would be staggeringly impactful for Addison County and for hundreds of kids, right? Hundreds of students, right?
I mean, that's
Right.
everybody's talking about how much it costs to
Right.
educate kids, and if you're not filling seats,
Right.
and people are paying for those seats whether they're filled or not.
Right.
Like, it's such an obvious problem that can be obviously addressed.
Right.
And it seems like that's what we should be knocking and spelling out for our legislature.
And I have a set of talking points I'd be happy to share with you, and then if you wanted to share.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be awesome.
Especially if you're going to be interacting with legislators, it would be something you could refer to.
Go ahead, Steve.
These are observations more than questions. I mean, we can't change what other people do. So as much as we know it would be better for Champlain and Otter Valley kids to come here, we can't twist their arm to make them come here.
Correct.
And full disclosure, I'm on the board, so I'm a little biased, but that's an amazing program over there. And if we can't get the people to support it outside of this district, we really need to support it in the district because it is so impactful and it is so important what's happened over there. And it is, it's one of those things like when you go to a place and the people around there say, yeah, that's an interesting tourist attraction, I've never been there. We have a really good career center that I don't think a lot of people appreciate, because if they went to another place, they would say, well, this is garbage. Why I didn't appreciate what we had until we lost it. And I would really, really encourage us to continue to support the Career Center because it is such an important resource. It is so valuable to the kids. If you have a chance, I know that the board commitments are really, really heavy on everybody, but if you have a chance to visit the Career Center and just look around at what they're doing and how they're interacting, if you can find kids there, because like you said, half the time they're out actually doing the work that they're being trained to do. So, it is really worth your time to come in and see. And if you can't do that, come to an open house because you get a lot of access there. So.
And on your table is our brand new Labor of Love program of studies. This has been a long time coming. We're very excited about it. So we hope that this might be a nice tool to help the community understand what this gym is that Addison County has provided.
I'm going to go Steve next and then Jamie.
Yeah, I have one thought. Just thank you for the presentation. I have not been to the Career Center, but I would like to make my way over there at some point to see this in action. Definitely, I think a lot of what we are trying to navigate is student and academic density. Small schools, big schools, and it's really heartening to hear that you have capacity and that you're also achieving these positive outcomes. I think that's very good because at times I think it's really easy in education to assume you need a certain density to hit the mark, and I don't know that that's always the case. I would be curious to know I think you said pre-technical and technical programs, is that 9th and 10th graders working together and then 11th and 12th working together, or are they separate?
Good question. So by law, pre-technical programs serve 9th and 10th graders, and 11th graders can take them if they have kind of had an epiphany and now they're thinking of this career path, right?
Yep.
Technical programs are for 11th and 12th graders, but 10th graders can take them if they're on path to graduate. If they have not failed, if they are otherwise ready on their path for graduation, they can take them. So one of the things that we are hoping is that more 10th graders understand that it is actually an option. Traditionally, they haven't understood that.
Thank you.
Okay, Jamie.
I don't want to belabor the point, but if people from other regions can technically come and attend, and we can provide transportation, what is the what is stopping them? And they want to go. They've expressed interest in this kind of education. We have room. We blah blah blah. What do you think is stopping them?
I think it's probably a number of things. One, it's not often done, so kids kind of feel like they're on the edge, right? If they do that, it's just generally
It's just
rarely
rare.
done.
Yeah.
I would assume if I was a sending district superintendent, that I would be concerned that if I were sending more kids than I had budgeted for in the first place, because each kid is quite a lot of money. So there may be that consideration happening.
I see.
And I don't think it's widely known. I was recently in a meeting with Otter Valley, and the instructors that have classes similar to ours were not necessarily aware that how many kids could come.
Right.
So I think it's education, I think it's fiscal, and I think it's cultural. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know.
Let's, these will be the last two questions and then we'll move on. Ellen?
This is more of a comment.
Okay.
And it's not to be cynical, but relying on legislative action in this year, even something that seemingly makes perfectly good sense and is good for all parties, it sounds like, feels a little risky, even if maybe even just because of the noise of what might happen in the 2026 legislation or legislative session. So I would be interested in sort of knowing if there are creative solutions to provide transportation or to get the word out or create partnerships or something with some of the neighboring districts that have CTEs that probably want their students to succeed too, even if they can't provide them that space, but if we can, because I'm a little bit worried about, like you said, Nicole, just what's going to happen is unpredictable, but it might be predictably not what we want it to be. And so are there plans B that we can come up with that might offer?
We are spending an incredible amount of energy on outreach and social media and mailings and flyers and ads and word of mouth and everything. And I would say getting a little bit of pushback from, neighbors to the north and south, just because what we are very conscious of and want to be very clear about is that students, first and foremost, should go to the CTE closest, right, in their service area, because it's all organized around that. We are only talking about students who otherwise wouldn't be served, right, who otherwise wouldn't have a seat. And so we have to be very careful with our messaging that it doesn't feel like we're trying to do something nefarious, that in fact we are trying to serve kids that do not have a seat in another CTE. But I can tell you that we are spending an enormous amount of energy on all of that kind of outreach, marketing, talking to principals, talking to superintendents, talking to guidance counselors, going to family nights, going to 8th grade nights, going to 10th grade nights. We're all over the place. So we're doing what we can do ourselves, but the big change would be a legislative one.
Steve? Yeah, I'm just looking at the map in your slides. It's the state with the yellow dots. And I was just going to ask about opportunities from over the mountain with the White River Valley and Rochester area, stuff like that. I didn't know if we had any students that come over.
We get an occasional one because our diesel program is really, it's sort of a point of pride. Not only is it one of the few remaining, but our students have really good outcomes, almost to a person. They're offered positions from that program. Some of our best graduates are currently in those fields and now are hosting students in our program now that they're in the field. And our ART program, although the enrollment isn't as high as we would like, it is the last one standing, and we do get kids that come specifically because they want that training. So, and our auto program, auto is very popular, and sometimes when kids are turned away from either Stafford or Chittenden County, we often get auto kids there too. So it's really those programs which draw kids from other places. And we, on the same, we lose about a handful up to 5 kids a year, maybe for cosmetology, which we don't offer.
Okay. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the report of the superintendent. I'm turning it over to Dr. Baker.
Okay, so we begin with some personnel appointments and resignations for your consideration. Just want to mention that Stephen McKinney is the assistant principal at Mary Hogan. Many of you may have met him in particular. He and his wife will be moving overseas, and so we'll be advertising that position. Charlotte Blomquist also has spent many years in the district. She was a classroom teacher at Ripton Elementary School and has spent this last year graciously working under her special education license, and so she will be retiring, and want to thank her for her service. And we will miss Brittany, who is a paraprofessional at Shoreham Elementary School. So those are there for your approval.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the resignations and appointments?
I move that we accept the resignation of Brittany Briard, the resignation of Stephen McKinney, and the retirement of Charlotte Holmquist as warned in the agenda.
Thank you. A second? A second. Okay, thank you. Any questions, discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please, of approving the slate of resignations and retirement, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? And abstentions? Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Laura. Next up.
Okay, so we have our second presentation of the budget for you. There's not a lot of new information here. Much of what we talked about in concept all along is showing up again in that respect. However, we've got some kind of a flow to walk through. I'm charged with some overview pieces and the staffing. We'll go through that together, and then I will turn it over to Matt for money. And I'm not sure if we'll beat Nicole's 20 minutes, but we will try to make efficient use of our time, as we're moving forward. So this budget does three things. The first thing that it does is it maintains the academic program and strategic direction that we set in budget year one of the strategic plan. There are 4 years that you have to budget within your strategic plan before it has reached its end. So in the first one, we built the equity-based budget model, which included some staffing ratios across schools to make sure that there was comparable staffing. We added 8 new instructional specialists, which was over $1 million investment, particularly in mathematics and also some additional literacy supports. We added resources in flexible pathways so that we would help the high school to attend to specific graduation requirements and percentages that they had in their radar. And we also added the Director of Inclusion, Equity, and Restorative Practices. And Sonia's online tonight as well. I just want to acknowledge both Sonia and Emily who are online listening and there as needed. And we added 3 student response coordinators, which brought forward the work of building communities that are attending to ensuring that students and staff are treating each other well. We are working in a human-centered restorative way, which was part of the strategic plan. This budget maintains all of that, and it attends to some of the enrollment declines that we are facing and ways in which we're working together to build some new learning communities. That's the first thing it does. The second thing that it does is it responds to the acute call to ensure that we have concentrated supports to attend to specific student success needs that were identified when we reviewed the data that was behind the equity-based budget in the first place. The third thing that it does is it controls the tax rate to our best ability. The tax rate from our school spending side is impacted to 2.15%. There are lots of other things that happen when it leaves our hands and it moves on to Montpelier. But if we were in the old days where a school board created a budget and then that meant that if everybody approved that, they would know what their tax rate was, the increase to our taxpayers would be 2.15% in this budget. So that's the third thing that it does. And all 3 of those things, I think, relate to the community values that we've heard. So there are 3 points that are kind of overarching that are outlined in this slide here that we've talked about and worked hard, to come through, I think, together. We have new elementary communities that are learning together. When the board decided that students from Ripton would learn in Salisbury, they decided that in March. That budget had already been created, not necessarily with that intention. And so here we have intentional supports in Salisbury to support what we now know, about those communities. We've discussed the extended supports that we've put together relative to students in Bridport and Shoreham that will be learning together next year. We've discussed the expansion of preschool and our beginnings in an early childhood initiative, and continued expanded flexible pathways at the high school. Also, in alignment with the work-based learning that Nicole talked about at the Career Center, there's other work-based learning opportunities that are moved forward that relate to the academic side at the high school, which I think we're excited. And the high school just had their flexible pathways night. That was a change related to those resources that are moving forward. So we expect kids in this budget at the high school level to be learning in continually different ways. For the first time in a long time, this budget allows all of our K-5 classrooms to have stable curricular supports that are in alignment with the high quality learning opportunities that we've identified as a district that will help to educate kids to the standards of excellence that this district adheres to, and that's something that I think our kids will find great support to their success. One of the things that we always talk about related to that are what are the staffing changes, and so you can see that on the orange side, our positions reduced, and I'll say more about that in a minute. In the blue box are new positions that are created, and then in the green box are existing positions that are optimized. I'll start with the green first. In the green box, you will see positions that are going to be included in Bridport that relate to the students from Shoreham and Bridport learning together. So in other districts, those might be considered positions that might not be carried forward in the decisions that you have supported so far. Those positions are going to be optimizing student learning. They are the supports that are largely enforcing the team concept that is in place, K1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, to address some of those student success needs that we've identified. The 10 new positions that are created, 3 of them relate to pre-K. One of them is a literacy interventionist, which is required by Act 139. And the others one of them relates to Salisbury. It's an additional half of an interventionist. As we watch those communities come together, we're deliberately building that into the FY27 budget. And then we have a pilot of a universal design instructional specialist that will help to make sure that our learning opportunities are what they need to be. That position is scheduled to be at Mary Hogan. We've found success with our student driver to help us to reduce costs in transportation that help with our students that need to be traveling long distances. And we've shifted our model in specialized services to try to provide some support to vacancies that we're simply just not able to fill with administrative assistance that so far is providing some success. So those relate to new investments and in some cases pivots away from old strategies that were not panning out. On the side of the orange, on the far right, you will see that there are some positions that don't have anything on next to the name of the position. Those are positions where there are people. The others relate to vacancies or retirements, things of that nature. So there are positions that either came from not operating Ripton, or in the case of an administrative assistant, there are currently 2 administrative assistants. One in Shoreham and one in Bridport. One is retiring, and so there will only need to be one in that sense. and I think some of the other retirements you've mentioned. The three that involve people, I just want to highlight specifically for you. One of them is a 0.3 reduction in a school nurse. That comes from the previous staffing model that we developed for comparability. So schools that are approximately 100 students, we will have at least 3 of them in our what we'll call medium-sized schools. They have an allocation of a 0.5 school nurse. Weybridge will be our smaller school. They have a 0.2 school nurse, and then the bigger schools in Middlebury have 1.33. So in not operating Ripton and in bringing the other 2 communities together, that staffing request for a school nurse was 0.5, and that's what's led to that 0.3 reduction. That's completely up to the board. If you decide that you'd like to see more nursing in all of our buildings, that's really up to you in that sense, but that's why that reduction is there. The art teacher, the music teacher, and the PE teacher reductions that you see next relate to also the closure of Ripton, to some extent pulling together Bridport and Shoreham relative to music, because we had 2 band and 2 chorus lesson pieces, and now we'll have 1 together. So there are some efficiencies there. And also there are, in order for students to be able to be with art, music, and PE teachers, it has to be able to be scheduled, and as we'll see in the next couple of slides, students in all of our schools will already have the scheduling that they need to meet the required programming and the opportunity programming that you put in the FY26 budget. So these reductions relate to logistics of not being able to use the professional expertise of folks because we can't make a schedule that will put students with them any more than they already are. So that's why those reductions are there. And I just want to be clear that every single program and every single professional that relates to any position that is on this board is valued highly and tremendously for their work. And so it's never lightly that anyone's position is considered for reduction, and it's certainly not a comment on whether or not the programs are valued. The other reduction that you will see that relates to a filled position is 1 classroom teacher, and that is at Mary Hogan, and that relates to enrollment. As I mentioned to you in our update, our enrollment overall from last year to this year drops by about 40 students. And some of that is at Mary Hogan. And so they are scheduled to have 3 sections of kindergarten and 3 sections of first grade next year. If for some reason there's a lot more enrollment at Mary Hogan, then the position that we have, that is the Universal Design Instructional Specialist, will be converted to a classroom position, and we'll be sure to advertise it with that in mind. So that's a little bit of the hedge in case we end up with enrollment that we don't expect. In the next 2 slides, there is a setup that is similar to what you saw last year, that shows the staffing allocation by building. And I say that with one caveat. It's one thing for us at the budget table to be able to make our standard allocations. The principals, once we have a past budget, do an excellent job of thinking about the people that are staffing those positions, how much travel time might be involved, and the way in which it is realistic to have people showing up in buildings. And the nurses, frankly, do a beautiful job ensuring that the chronic conditions are covered. And that might mean their presence in a building looks exactly the way that it does in the budget table, or it might mean that they're spending a little bit more time somewhere than they are expected, and that is within their discretion to do in partnership with their principals. So there's a little bit of flex in that happens in real time. You will see that the one of the things I want to draw your attention to is that Cornwall and that list has the kind of the standard allocation of full-time equivalents that you'll see in 16.2. And then you'll see that Salisbury has extra FTEs, that relates to an interventionist and extra guidance. And you will see that the Bridport Central School, which in this case will house students from both Shoreham and Bridport, has additional staff beyond that. So that's where you can see the differences based on the configurations that we expect for each of the schools. If we keep going, you will see the same thing relative to pre-K, MUMS, and MUHS. And this is information that you've been previously provided. It just is kind of summarized for you here. One note about pre-K, what we've done here relative to, staffing, you'll see that, you have slides in the appendix about enrollment. We have currently forecasted enrollment that is at the students that we have now, as well as those that are currently on a wait list in Bridport. So obviously we are working toward an expansion of pre-K in this budget. It's different, right? Because in K-12, students have to come. In pre-K, they don't have to come. So now we're into, sort of more of a social entrepreneurial area, and we need to work with families to meet their needs and determine how to meet the needs of families in ways that are not already being met, by other providers. And so it feels a little bit different at this stage. If the board and the community feels it's wise for us to have this expansion in our budget, the first thing that we'll be doing is finding these families and asking for commitments, and we will not be hiring personnel until we have that in place. Just to be clear about that. All right, if we keep going, I think the takeaways here is that, we have repurposed approximately $500,000 of funds that we used differently in the FY26 budget in order to redirect them toward increased academic supports. With the structures that are now in place, all schools have moved beyond any structural barriers that were previously in place in order to be able to help us focus more squarely on achieving the academic goals that are stated in the strategic plan. And that feels good. As I said, we have, put together a plan in partnership with you and relative to your feasibility target that is not only under that, but it also helps to manage a tax rate for the communities in the things that we have within our control, at 2.15%. Any questions on those things before we go to Matt, who is going to explain exactly where all that money is divided into?
I don't have a question, I just had a comment. I just really appreciate that all of the care that goes into teachers and that sort of attention in these budgets, because among my different meetings with people from across the state, there's definitely been the reports that they have aren't as positive as the reports that I can give from coming to my board meetings, and there are kids who will say oh, my board is talking about saving money through getting rid of veteran workers and different things like that, which is really upsetting, and I really appreciate that I can know that my teachers are supported.
And now you see why the best part of my day always comes from a student. So thank you, Nava. Yeah. Any other questions?
Laura.
I noticed that if you add up the full-time equivalency for librarians, art teachers, music teachers, all the AMS staff, they don't all come out to round numbers. How does that impact our ability to hire and retain staff in those areas?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it is one of the perennial things that that school districts face, and it's an unknown. One of the presentations that Nate Levinson, who I think did some consulting up with Addison Northwest and Mount Abe, number of years ago, and he did a presentation to the legislature around the foundation formula, and he discouraged what we call rounding, right? When if you need a 0.8, then we'll hire a 1.0. We'll round up to 1.0 to be able to hire. He called that out as a fiscal practice that did not represent the level of public stewardship that he felt was important. We have presented a budget to you that does not have rounding in it, and there will be some operational challenges in implementing, a 0.2 reduction or a 0.3 reduction, and there may be some other ways in which we can support those fine professionals to stay with us in ways that are manageable. I think what is most difficult about that, to some of the conversations earlier, is the healthcare. Because, if somebody goes from a 1.0 to a 0.8, then they are now, their healthcare, right, is adjusted in that respect. So these are important considerations. We will have to work through it in the best way that we can if it is the board's choice to move in these directions. The composite of the FTEs, Matt, if you go back to the slide with the orange block on it, thank you. The amount of money that the 0.3 school nurse and the 0.2 art teacher and the 0.4 music teacher and the 0.2 PE teacher represent is probably about $150,000, which is, that is what it is within a $53 million budget, but these dollars are important, and yet that's about its scope, so that answered more than your question, but hopefully it was helpful.
Okay, Mary Heather, then Ellen.
Is that just salary or salary and benefits?
Salary and benefits.
Ellen?
I wonder if you can clarify a couple of things, Wendy. One is, I don't think I'm totally understanding what positions optimized mean versus created or reduced, and and if that's like an hour increase or whatnot. And I think part of what's tripping me up is, and this is oversimplified, I realize, but I don't quite know how. We have an optimized position of a 0.2 art teacher, but we're also reducing 0.2 of an art teacher. So there's some connections that I might be unfairly drawing, but I would love to know more about what optimized means. And then I just want to say back to you what I'm understanding about the reductions in the art teacher percentage, music teacher, PE teacher, to see if I'm hearing you right. It sounds like a lot of those have to do with an inability to have those positions connect to actual students in a consolidated system. So what I'm thinking is, with Ripton closed and now Ripton students attending school in Salisbury, they're attending the art and PE and music classes that the Salisbury students were, so that's a reduction there. And then that would also be true in Shoreham, in merging with Bridport, in which case maintaining those hours of an art teacher, a music teacher, and a PE teacher would mean hours that the kids are already meeting with those people. But I'm just not totally following like the reduction side of that. And then, those two things, a little more clarity would be helpful.
Let me take the first one first. So the positions optimized really means that these are positions that are able to do more for kids because of the way they're structured. So, for example, with the K-1-2 and the 3-4-5 team, an interventionist that is now working with a K-1-2 team is working with 3 grades of kids, same number of students, but only across 3 grades. So that's an optimization of that person's work, because they are not having to cross 6 grades, in that sense. And really that when we were talking about the way in which we are staffing Bridport School in support of Shoreham and Bridport students, it felt like we are able to optimize what these professionals can provide to students in a different way. The same is true, with the art teacher. The art teacher, that point too relates to, an opportunity art, if you will, a block 6 art. And, when I'm done, actually, Matt, if you want to go to that next slide now, it will actually help. So if you see, Ellen, if you look at the art line, you will see block 3-6. So if you look at Bridport last year only had 0.1 art in block 6. Now they have 0.3 art in block 6, which means they're getting more opportunities. So that means beyond the regular art, what they're getting is an art teacher that is there for a whole extra day to be able to push into classrooms, help provide different types of opportunities for kids. That might enable teachers to have more professional development support, kids to fold art into their science work in ways that they haven't otherwise. It's an additional support. So that is where that optimization happens. Because we've added that into Bridport, we're not proposing a 0.4 cut in art, because we have left that art there for those students. So that's probably how they tie, Ellen, if that makes sense. The nurse, I just want to be clear that the nursing is not the same as the art, the PE, and the music.
Yeah.
And I just want to be clear about that distinction in that sense. If the board chose to make a change in nursing, it would mean that we on the operational side would probably start with an allocation of half a 0.5 nurse in each of our buildings, and allow the nurses to adjust that depending upon if there were chronic conditions in one building more than another. That's very different from some of the other pieces we're talking about. Relative to your other question, if you could restate it again for me, Ellen, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I guess I'm just having a hard time, from a practical standpoint, understanding why, if we're merging Shoreham into Bridport, and if Ripton has consolidated into Salisbury, and those kids are now going to be attending PE in those locations, and art and music, why are we reducing? Because my assumption is that is it because those staff are already spread across those schools, and so they just will be in fewer locations? I'm just trying to understand what I thought I heard you say, which is that the reductions here speak to the consolidations of student bodies that we've decided on.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things I think that's important to remember is, if you think about the choice to close Ripton Elementary School, right? So we had to bring a teacher over. There's now a 6th classroom in Salisbury. Other students go into the other classrooms, right? So we added a kindergartner and maybe 2 students into this grade and 3 students into this grade. So those are folded into the art classes that are already there. So the art FTE, if we just use this as an example, a hypothetical kind of real example, the art FTE that was in Ripton isn't needed in full into a new school because the students are folded in except for the one new classroom. So it's not quite the same as when they were educated in a standalone facility. There's also travel time that's not necessarily happening, to the degree that it was happening in that respect. So each year with the equity-based budgeting, what you can expect us to do is go back to the allocations that relate to, the original staffing model, and then see what's needed, roughly after that. The principals give feedback into how the opportunities are going with the other FTEs and whether they can use them and what that looks like. If there are more staff than is needed, which is the case in music, Ripton had music classes, right? 3 music classes. Shoreham had a band and a chorus, and Bridport had a band and a chorus this year. So all of those things are now more streamlined. Bridport will have 1 band and chorus. So before that there were 2, and lessons in 2 separate buildings. So that's how that streamlining can take place, and that is what results in the music FTE drop being a little bit bigger.
That was my question: is if it was all related to the efficiencies of
Yes.
consolidating school.
Yes,
bodies.
and if we could avoid if we could avoid the challenge of reducing a position of 0.2 and trying to contend with the operational realities of that, then we would have. But we felt like, okay, we have met the regulatory needs. We have maintained the opportunity and increased it in some cases when needed in order to support communities come together. And so this is really where we are relative to reductions that are mindful of taxpayer requirements. So that's why they're there.
Jamie, you had a question?
I think I feel bad because I feel like I'm going to re-ask some of Ellen's question, but I just want to make sure I get it. So what you're saying is that the reductions to art, music, and PE mean that kids will not experience a reduction of those classes.
Correct.
So that's great, but the nursing is different.
Correct.
And so some schools or in general overall will experience some reduction, or how does that?
Well, I may have said that's correct around nursing too quickly. So in nursing, students currently don't have access to full-time nurses in their schools, right? So in Bridport and in Shoreham, they currently have access to 0.4 nurse, which is about 2 days a week. There's a nurse in the building. And in Weybridge, they have 1 day a week, and so on and so forth, right? So in not operating Ripton and in moving Bridport and Shoreham together, that results in 0.3 of extra nursing that used to be associated with running 2 more K-5 facilities.
Right.
So we have made that transparent for you. If you were to choose to hold on to that FTE, we would have to allocate it in the buildings that are Weybridge, Cornwall, Salisbury, Bridport, or one of the 3 Middlebury schools. So that's the difference.
Okay, and then I guess my question about maybe all of those categories is like what impact does it have on the jobs of people? Like what does a 0.3 reduction mean for, like, does one job experience a reduction, or how is that reduction experienced by a labor force?
That depends. The ways in which reduction in force happens are laid out in the master agreements. But sometimes there are people who say, well, I already work part-time. I would rather not work full-time. And so, I'd like to actually have my job changed in this way, and it fits better for my lifestyle. And so those things can work out. Sometimes there will be a number of people who, thank you, Nava, who want to make a change in their schedule, and that's okay. Other times it's an involuntary loss of almost a third of a salary and benefits, and that is not nothing. And so I'm glad you're asking.
Okay, and then sorry, just one more thing. The last thing is I thought Matt said, or someone, maybe it was you that said, that the total value of those proposed reductions was
3.1 FTE.
Yeah, but money.
About $150,000 for everything except the classroom teacher. So except that one, which is an enrollment-based decision, in that sense. So that's yet again a bit different.
So you're 150,000 you're talking about for the 0.3 nurse, 0.2 art, 0.4 music, and 0.4 PE, 0.2 PE.
Approximately, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Steve.
Yeah. One, I appreciate this chart kind of laying stuff out clearly and concisely. I was hunting through Matt's color-coded sheet, looking for the nursing reductions. Appreciate it being easier to digest, so thank you for that. And I guess, I'm trying to kind of put this together and collect my thoughts on it. I'm definitely taking in the comments we got about health entries and just how much work our nursing staff does. I did not know that before this meeting. I'm sure there's a lot more in those numbers, but that's a lot, just looking at Bridport, 1,400 health entries for a year. That's, how many school days are there in a year?
175.
I can't do that math to figure out how many entries per day, but
8.
That's quite a few. So that's a lot. Those are big numbers. So we have those comments, and then even hearing from Nava, kind of her take on the nursing stuff, and trying to figure out my perspective on it. I do think there are some things that are important not to think about as ratios. Things like school security are one of those, where like we don't look at that based on a ratio. And is this something else that it makes sense not to look at as a ratio as well? And it's not for me to decide that, but I do think there are those points in time where it's perhaps good to step back and take a look at how we talk about stuff. So.
Any other questions for me before I turn it over to the last slide, which I think is the dollar slide? So we are asking you currently for a budget that's $52,995,189, which does represent at its top line a 5% increase. It's an ed spending increase of 2.8%, which basically means the money less, the federal grants, right? So the difference between the 2.8 and the 5% are monies that taxpayers typically don't raise. It's raised, differently. So as I said, as it stands currently right now, it's about a 2.15% increase to the district tax rate, which is 3 cents. That is where it rests in our hands, and that's what we have within our power to control at this point. So the rest of this presentation takes you through, just the different cost centers, the way that the Department of Ed looks at it, and I don't know if you want Matt to move through that quickly, and then you can have discussion. Sure. But you have one more presentation scheduled on the 12th, where at that time, ideally, you would approve a budget as well as a warning. So if you would like us to bring a different number to you at that time, or to put something else in here or take something else out, then we would want to know that beforehand. We also have principals here. And so if you have questions that relate to some of the things that might be happening in their buildings, they're here to just provide their insights, which are vast and far more interesting than mine.
So Matt, I think it makes sense to go through yours. And
so we're here 10% of the way through the presentation.
But this is the
much
hardest
faster.
stuff. Yeah, so yeah.
Yeah.
He's not in charge of marketing, is he?
No.
For the speed round, we're going to go through the general fund by cost center, just to catch the headlines from each one of our cost centers. Again, we talked about the blocks during the first presentation. Now we're switching to our cost centers, which are ultimately how we organize things in our accounting software, and a good tracker for year-to-year changes as well. So highlight real level stuff with some headlines on each slide. These are designed for speed and to move through them, but also available as a reference for questions or for a deeper dive if need be. Debt in one sentence is going down because the construction loan at Bridport has matured. The district office budget is going up. The drivers there are our standard salary and benefits, which hit any cost center that's holding personnel, as well as the reclassification of district positions, just changing the ratio of salaries in the DO budget. We're adding an MCTV contribution for the first time. And then we now have to buy flood insurance as a separate piece of our insurance policy. So all of our insurance purchasing is covered in the district office budget, and there's a little bit of a driver there. The technology budget is very flat year to year. We have some drivers that were offset by some small reductions in supply and hardware, truing that up to the 25 usage and inflationary updates.
I have a question on the flood insurance. Is that due to like new flood insurance rate maps, or like what is triggering that? I'm curious to understand. That
was the result of the 2 years of significant flooding that the state saw, and I think the FISBIT, who handles most of the school district's insurance policies, probably get told by the people that insure them that they need to augment their coverage, and so this exists as a new rider that you have to purchase if you're in a specific flood zone, which I think we are, so that's what led to that supplemental policy being written for us.
So is that true for high school, Mary Hogan, district office, kind of
all it's a district policy. So in facilities, you can see, like, compared to tech, for instance, facilities is a much larger budget. We have, a tremendous burden of maintaining both the custodial teams that take care of our buildings and the buildings themselves. We saw some reduction areas and some increase areas sort of combining to create that 8.2% increase year to year. We're obviously removing costs associated with running the Ripton facility that were part of the FY26 budget, as well as the human resources from there. We are seeing some calibration reduction possible in areas like utilities and professional services where we budgeted for more than we actually wound up needing, and so we're recalibrating. In some of those same areas like utilities and communications, we are also seeing an increase because rates have changed, things like trash pickup, bottled gas, and other things in that department. Internet, I think, would be the communications part, have combined to about $100,000 new dollars. We've added $100,000 of construction services to help spruce up the Bridport and Shoreham facilities, ensure that we have a pre-K compliant playground facility ready to go, and some other minor construction level improvements to those buildings. And then in the repair and maintenance sector of our facilities budget, again, an $111,000 increase, which was reflective of some of the sort of increased costs of keeping our buildings maintained year to year. I would say that that's definitely an inflation factor, but it's also a use factor where we're trying to keep up. But the rate of growth in repair and maintenance is exceeding that 4% inflation guideline. In transportation, we have a very standard 3% year-to-year increase for our major contract. We've added on an additional increase that we estimate for other regular ed or non-special ed transportation services, things such as overtime and fuel surcharges. That said, we don't anticipate any major increases for the Ripton-Salisbury combination or the Shoreham-Bridport combination in terms of needing to add new buses or removing buses from the contract. The service is set to be maintained, and the routes are set to run without any major surcharge or additions. We have a now outdated career center slide that we will update. But we weren't far off in a 9.7% year-over-year increase. Worth pointing out that we pay on a 6-semester average of enrollment. So we look backwards 6 semesters. That's our enrollment, and then we multiply that by the current tuition rate. So at a 10 to 11% increase in tuition rate, you're probably looking at around $40,000 per enrollee as the cost of attendance in the Career Center this coming year. In UPK, we are amending our budget to show a revenue corrected figure for the third of the salary that we hold there for our coordinator. So that brings a small reduction. We're also seeing that the enrollment has leveled off, and so the 3% increase in tuition rate doesn't really have a driving effect because of that enrollment. In student services and special education, we are seeing growth. That growth is driven by our regular personnel drivers, as well as $1.3 million in new outplacement expenses, and the positions that have been created, the administrative support positions and the driver, set against the reduction of our 3 special educator FTEs, all unfilled.
And the sunsetting of the alternative ed.
Program administrator. So a little bit of a balance there. Worth pointing out at this stage that we will see some matching revenues to offset that new extraordinary expense. In PD and curriculum, we're seeing a 12% increase, which is really a salary transfer of about $140,000 from direct instruction. This is a salary transfer indirectly via grant investments, so we are investing more in the grants from direct instruction and less in the grants from PD and curriculum. So the general fund net effect is that the PD and curriculum is going to go up this year, and then it should level off as a one-time effect. Which brings us to direct instruction, our largest cost center. You can see there over $25 million this year for the first time, and a 2% overall increase. We've broken the cost center into a couple of different slides, so personnel and non-personnel, just to keep some trackability there. You can also find Block 6 and Block 7 broken out if you were curious what's going on there in the appendix at the end of this presentation. So in personnel costs, again, we've got our drivers, and we have our personnel changes, and we have our budget here. So we've got wage increases, which would that 3 to 6% wage increase, depending on status, would trigger about $250,000 of new money. Health insurance at 7.374 would trigger roughly $189,000, and then dental insurance is going up for the first time in a while this year, so that's an additional $3,500 in new money. So those things were largely offset by the positional reductions for those Ripton positions that we looked at earlier. And then salary and benefit truing, where we're taking things that were placeholders for folks like our instructional specialists that were created in last year's budget plan, but we didn't know who those people were going to be or what their benefits packages were going to look like or any of that stuff. So placeholders were now replaced by actual values. That creates positive changes and reductions across a lot of different lines. And we always do that to make sure that the budget is adapted to the people that it's serving. So that's the truing up process. The net effect of all those things is about a 1.1% increase in S&B. On the non-personnel side of things, again, you can see some truing up happening, some year-to-year changes across our different accounting codes, the 5300s up to the 5800s. Each one of those has separate sub-components, so the major ones are listed here for you to look at. Oftentimes that change is on a 2-year cycle, so we're looking at what happened in FY25 to inform what's going to happen in FY27 as far as the spending pattern. So when we see something going up, it could be that there wasn't enough budgeted there. The usage was greater in 25 than what we budgeted for in 26. So we're anticipating the need to have more money available. We do things like look at books and supplies across grade bands too, to say all elementary school students are going to receive the same $31 allotment, because that's the total book and periodical budget for all elementary schools divided by the number of students. And then we prorate that by school. And then we split that proration into two different accounts, one for the front office and one for the library. Sorry, the front office one goes to the classrooms. One for the classrooms, one for the library, which are our two areas of each school that buy books. The ratio of that split is determined by each principal, and it rolls over year to year. So that's just one small example of how a line like books and periodicals is adjusted for FY25 use, projected for FY27 inflation, prorated or equalized by pupils, prorated by school, and then split according to each principal's preference. So that's what happens there. We're also buying a car in the books and supplies line for the high school, so that's part of that.
Yeah, just a quick question about the 45% difference in tuition fees and miscellaneous.
Yeah, I think that's we're changing where the PAHCC expense was. That changed, created a year-to-year change that was not notable because it was already in the budget from before. Okay, so last but not least, food service. We're just rolling over our same $300,000 general fund budget, which is again meant to just catch anything that doesn't get reimbursed through the federal and state reimbursement processes that we use to fund food service. So for reference, food services annual operating expenses are about 1.7, 1.8 million. Stop there for 10 seconds. Okay, we're all with me. In order to spend money, we have to make it, and we do that through a variety of different ways. We have our federal grants for now. We have our state grants. We have local revenue, which is code for money that we charge other people to come to school here in the form of tuition. And we have our ed spending, which is the amount to be raised by taxes. That's calculated as the difference after we take our total expenses and back those first three things out. Here it is in triangles. So we can see 52,955,189 as the total expense. The census block grant, the consolidation grant, the transportation aid grants are all examples of general fund state grants, and tuition would also be in there too. And then we have our federal and medical services grants, so our title grants, IDEA B and IDEA B pre-K, and then Medicaid and EPSD TMAC. Everything that's left is ed spending. So it felt important to mention the federal and medical services grant revenue, because that's these always have offsetting expenses and revenues. What we bring in revenue is what we can spend as an expense. However, our design for investments in the grants has every year been under what our total allocation was. We roll some money over every year. It's not like we're leaving money on the table, but we've left a little slack in the rope to increase our spend across all of our federal and health services grants. By increasing by 21% or $361,000 in our FY27 plan, we're able to help sort of have some control over where the budget lands in terms of its total percent change year to year, the effect on the tax rate. This 21% uptick in grant usage doesn't eat up our entire capacity to expand our investments, but it does turn the volume up on them a little bit so that we keep our ed spending sustained and under control. Which leads us to the summary of all of our revenues. So we've got that offsetting GF, general fund revenue. That's that first triangle. We've got our other funds, grant revenue, second triangle, and that gives us a total of about 10.4 million. 16% more money from our non-ed spending tax sources. So we'll just leave that as a placeholder for now. Now we're going to go into LTWADM, version 6. So this is our long-term weighted average daily membership. It's our weighted pupil count, which uses two pieces, weights and average daily membership. The average daily membership is a two-year average of enrollment in our schools. And then we added weights for grade level, for demographics, and for district sparsity. I can tell you that version 7 has come out. I couldn't bear to put it in this presentation, but it ticks down. The punchline is that we're at negative 0.5% in the most recent version.
All right.
So going in the right direction towards zero. And what does that say? It says, even though we are seeing a downtick in average daily membership in the form of enrollment, we're also seeing an uptick or a balancing effect of weights in terms of things like the weight of our student body relative to their age. We have more older kids next year, which means they're going to bring in more weight, which means we have some offsetting gains there. If you were paying attention during the speed round, we put a price tag on each slide. And if you add all those price tags up, that's going to tell you the story of every dollar that we put towards the kids, including the offsetting revenues. And so this slide is really meant to take those price tags and sum them up, all expense categories, and using that same LTWADM, show what a price tag calculation would look like for all of our weighted students versus a per pupil spend. Not much else to say there other than, obviously when all dollars are considered, we're spending a significant amount more on a per pupil basis.
Matt, could I?
Yeah, Matt? Go ahead, Steve.
You list on here the excess spending threshold. Where is that now, and how close are we, or how far away are we?
Good question. We'll get there.
Oh, okay.
We're going to go to the district tax rate, unless there are any other questions. To get the district tax rate, we have to do some calculations. So on that big triangle, there was that $52 million, $53 million number. We're going to back out all the offsetting revenue. That's both the federal part and the tuition and state grants part. And that yields our ed spending of $42,531,832. If we want to compare where that is relative to our FY26 amount, it's 2.8% more. And that's really the number that we focused on with regards to that 3% feasibility target that was set in the beginning of this process, because that's a truly apples to apples number. It takes both the expense picture and the revenue picture into account to create a fair comparison of the spending plan from year 1 to year 2. Okay, now we're going to take our LTWADM version 6 and divide that total amount to get that ed spend amount to get a per pupil ed spending of $15,617. If we wanted to compare that to last year, we can see that's representing 3.4% growth in the amount that we're spending per equalized pupil. Again, that's going to tick down a little bit because we've gained a few more LTWADMs, but I think something in that 3% range feels fair as a landing spot. Steve, the excess spending threshold is 16,331, which gives us 4% capacity to spend up to that amount. So we are spending 96% of the excess spending threshold. Is another way of saying that.
Steve?
Am I correct in that the excess spending threshold has been enforced and not enforced and kind of varied over the years?
It wasn't enforced during the pandemic.
All right.
It was suspended for.
It was suspended, but it's
years.
back in full force now.
It's the third fiscal year, I think, that it's
Yeah.
going back.
Second, yeah. No, last year was.
Second, last year was the first.
And if in fact we exceed the threshold, then for the amount above that is double taxation.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's say we
For our
went $500 per pupil above the threshold, $500 would get added to our per pupil spend as in the calculation of the tax rate. So it would make it look like we're spending $500 more per pupil, which would put it into the tax calculation twice. Okay, so now we're going to take all of it and bring it together. We've got our ed spend divided by our LTWADM, gives us our ed spend per weighted pupil. Now we're going to take the yield, which is the first piece of information that we don't control. This comes from the tax commissioner in the December 1st letter that gets sent out to all districts. It's based on the equalization study, which is the state's annual survey of property values, market values relative home sale relative to the assessed or grand list values of each town. So the tax commissioner sets a yield, which is the tax department's best guess at what amount is needed to raise the funds to fund all of the ed spending for every district in the state. So they're looking at this really big picture. And that's that 8,849. I'm not going to get into adjusted this year other than to say starting last year and again this year, that yield has been adjusted by a factor that represents a state average so that the maths out to a less scary number when it comes to the effects of the common level of appraisal. It's a benign calculation when it comes to the contents of the tax rate, but it's designed to insulate the individual town tax rate from these big swings by tying them to the average of the state before we differentiate them town by town. So it's a lot for nothing. But the discount that we are still receiving as part of the previous legislation, I can't remember the acts. 173. Is now in its third year, so that also gets adjusted. It would have been 8 cents unadjusted. It adjusted to 11 cents. Just like last year, it would have been 10 cents, but it adjusted to close to 14. It'll go down 20.
Is this the last year?
It'll go down 20. No, it'll 13, 10, 8, 6, 4.
Okay.
That was my question, because I know it diminishes over time.
Yeah, 20% per year. So I guess it'll be 0 at the end of time. My 20% is more, but something like that. Where that lands is $1.65. This is our district tax rate. This is an important number because after this, it doesn't get any easier to understand.
And it is out of our control.
Because it's out of our control.
Yeah. Yes.
We worked on understanding it together this morning in a session and came up with this slide, which I'm sorry, Jason, we snuck it in here as a unapproved part of version 2, but felt it would be important, so it was worth the risk. Here we can see 6 bullet points which align with the process from school budget to the individual tax bill. Within our control are the first 2. So we have our ed spending, which we just decided was going to be 2.8 based on the spending plan that you saw. That turns into our district tax rate of 2.15% via the calculations that you just saw. From here, we have to ask some questions to figure out what's going on. So we have to know which rate is used. So in Vermont, the state has 3 different tax levers that it sets rates for. There's the homestead rate, which is what we're usually referring to when we talk about people's property taxes. But there's also the non-homestead property rate, which is what second homeowners pay, which is what businesses pay, etc. I think land is taxed in a non-homestead. And then we have income, which is a basis for paying for people who are low income, 100% on income, and for people who are sort of on a sliding scale of income and property wealth, pay an income adjusted rate via credit. So there's a lot of complexity in there that creates almost like a tax fingerprint for every taxpayer relative to their status. Are you somebody who owns one home in Vermont or two homes in Vermont, or have income sensitivity and high property wealth, or income sensitivity and no property wealth, or you're a renter? You know, there are all these different things that that come up here in terms of figuring out what your tax bill is going to be. Then we have to figure out what's going on with your CLA and your town's assessment status. Where are the paper values, the grand list values of your town relative to the current values? Do you have old assessments? You know, everyone knows, like, you know, you haven't been assessed in 10 years, your home is now worth more than it was 10 years ago. That will trigger a CLA below 1, which is designed to raise your tax rate artificially because your grand list values are too old and they need to be reassessed. So knowing where your town is in that process is the next step. And then finally, we need to know, this is only half your tax bill, what's going on in your town? Did you buy a new ambulance or a fire truck? Did you build a new library? What's the, you know, do you have new roads to drive on, right? Like, what's going on the municipal budget and the town side of things, because that's going to be another part of the whole tax bill. So once you have understood all of those things, you could make a guess at what your individual tax bill is going to look like year to year, but it really is a byproduct of each one of those in its own way, and important to know that as we, you know, go to the next step. Okay. The next step is where we're going to look at our town tax rates for the first time. So that projected adjusted CLA is from the December 1st letter, the equalization study. Those are pretty locked in numbers and show each town's position relative to the state average. So you can see Middlebury there at just about 100% is at 100% of the state average. The state average is 70%. So Middlebury is around 70% true to the property values relative to when it was last assessed. We have other towns that are way above 100%, which means they are way above the state average, which means that they have either been that they're very close to what the actual values of their towns are. We can see Cornwall, Ripton, and Weybridge all in the last year had reassessment happen, and so the CLAs go up because fewer rate points are needed to raise the same number of dollars from homes that now cost or are worth more on paper. Right? The assessment says values go up on paper, the tax rate goes down accordingly. Doesn't mean your tax bill will go down. It means the tax rate doesn't need to be as high to raise the same amount of money. We have 3 towns in Bridport, Salisbury, and Shoreham that were reassessed last year, and you can see a little bit of a slide up in those towns because we have obviously created a budget that grows from year to year, but we also have sort of an equalization happening as those towns adjust to their new assessment relative to the market rates. So that's a lot. Any questions on town tax rates? Great.
We had quite a lengthy discussion on how do you talk about this, and that's what prompted the previous slide that we saw, that it's so complicated and they've made it so much more complicated that we really need to focus on what we are in control of.
Okay, that's it. So we do have some extra resources at the end, so feel free to just note that those are there. If you want the sausage recipe for the LTW80M, it's in here. And yeah, that's it.
Questions? Mary Heather.
That final LTW80M, when are we expecting the final number?
Yeah, I think we should have already had it. I think I don't know. It seems like the changes are getting smaller and smaller each time they get made. I know that the state is working with data managers to do the last bits of reconciliation, where there are some lists of students who are contested. A handful of students. Is it your kid? And that's I think the last bit of work. So again, I think that maybe we see one more version, but we're talking about tenths of a percentage point.
So I guess as a follow-up, the question about the number of students living in poverty and the weighting of those. Has there been resolution across the state, in our district, about how close we are to reality on those numbers?
So the two questions were like on the statewide level and on a local level. It was identified as a statewide problem in our last, right? And so I haven't heard any new information that suggests it's still a statewide problem, which makes me think what's happening overall is similar to what's happening in our district, which is that more students have been identified by the AOE data team in the last couple of weeks, and that these increases have largely been a reflection of new demographic weight coming into the formula that wasn't there in the earlier drafts.
Okay.
I don't.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
Yeah.
Other questions?
And I think, our team feels that our numbers are coming into alignment with where we would expect them to be. So and other superintendents are reporting similar movement. So
I will say, what we're noticing, because if you remember, like we rely pretty heavily now on direct certification to feed us the data for students who qualify for the free band or reduced band in terms of family income. And those FRL, free and reduced lunch bands, are what the state uses to calculate that at or below 185% of the federal poverty line data. So that's where they're getting it from. The only other option for input of data is the paper sheet that we supply families with. It's called a family income form. And that goes out in the beginning of the year. And it was, as we dug into the guts of this spreadsheet and looked at the bands under a microscope, because they're all coded by this certain code, and you need to pick the codes apart to figure out what came from where. We did see, a significant number of responses came from the form for our district. So it was a good lesson in not abandoning that as a collection method for future years, even though there's this sort of sleek and convenient automation in direct certification. And it's still going to be where most of our data comes from.
Ron.
Thank you for these presentations. They were as clear as they could be, I think. And the number seems reasonable in terms of and what the board kind of requested that you aim for. I guess my question is a bit of a bird's eye view. If in a year when we kind of reduce the number of buildings that we're planning to be running, there's still a rise in the tax rate and the ed spending. Like, this will be unpopular, especially agreeing that, but what about next? What about the year after? And what about the year after that? It's like, is there a long-term game plan here that doesn't include drastically reducing what we can provide to students? I'm not saying that's on you guys. I'm kind of trying to think together about this.
What was the last thing you said, Ron? A long-term game plan for what?
For how we continue to provide good education for students without closing buildings.
Right.
Oh, and so was there a question there, or?
I'm opening for discussion.
Okay, Steve?
Yes, I was going to say that, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've wondered similar things and just kind of where is the endpoint to some of the decisions we've made. And I've mentioned it on facilities and like, you know, exactly what you're saying. We close buildings and only see so much savings. Where does that leave us? You know, is the logical endpoint to continue to close buildings until what, we have to build more buildings, or, you know, like, I don't know. I think it's a very valid question. The other thing that I would tack on and encourage people to think about as we do talk about this in public, I don't have the slide, the unapproved slide in my version that Matt had, but I think we had 2 kind of circles we controlled and 4 that we don't control. And with the conversations going on in the legislature, what is it down to 1 that we would control? 5 that
future?
We wouldn't, you know, and I mean, that's the trajectory of this conversation, and it's, I don't know where it ends. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you, but certainly is a question I have as well. It's my perspective.
Mary, Heather, and then Steve. The others.
Yeah, I think to provide a little bit of context for that, I mean, it's a similar conundrum that the Career Center is in, right? Like they have facilities with capacity, as do we. And in order for their cost, their tuition to go down, they have to fill their seats, right? And sort of we have a similar problem where we have more sort of empty seats in many buildings than is needed, or then we have the number of students to fill them. And so it's a similar situation where we're paying for those seats, we're paying for those buildings, and we're paying to staff those buildings. And the staffing is the big driver because that is 85% of our budget, largely due to benefits. And so if we are consolidating students into buildings and we're not making big changes in our staffing, we're not going to see huge differences. And one of the reasons we're not seeing those differences is because many of those staff are being optimized, right? We've decided we're going to use that talent, we're going to double down and, you know, create more support for students. We're reinvesting in our literacy options. We're increasing librarian at Bridgeport to support that effort. And so we're making targeted investments in, for example, our Block 7 that are using some of the resources that would normally be saved. And so we're not going to see an immediate reduction in spending because we've decided to reallocate some of those staffing resources. And so the expectation that, well, you're not saving money, what was this good for, I think is not really recognizing how we're reallocating some of those resources. And eventually, in the long run, hopefully, if our strategic plan and our strategic efforts continue to move forward and we see some success and we see some improvements in student performance, then perhaps some of those support resources that we are investing in will not be as necessary. No, I don't know if that's true. I don't know how long that will take. I suspect it will probably take longer than we hope it to take because that's just the nature of investing in education and things change. But unless we see staffing reduced to a large degree, the amount of savings is not going to be as big, right? But I do think that it's worth noting if you are operating 7 schools instead of 9 schools, there are some positions that are not as necessary because those other schools that are absorbing those kids and those seats are now being filled are already attended to by staff that are already in the building. And so some positions have been reduced. Administrative assistants, eventually like a part-time portion of a principal, things like that. And so we are seeing some reductions, but not to the degree that you might expect, because like I said, we've made a conscious decision as a board to reinvest in equity efforts to try to make things a little more equal across the district, but also really target support for students that really need it. So I think when you're looking at it from a bird's eye view, you do need to take into account like what is the most costly resource. The most costly resource is staffing. And so the degree to which we're being more efficient and sort of filling the seats that are already sitting in front of an instructor, those are some efficiencies that are made. But when we are investing in trying to do some remedial work, we may be holding on to some staff to help with that remedial work, if that's making sense. So I think we have to be careful about, this is unpopular, we're closing buildings and no savings are made. I think that's just not a really accurate representation of what is being done, nor what we should expect, if that makes sense.
Steve?
Yeah, during the budget presentation, I try to take the time to write things down and say all my things at once rather than go back and forth. I do support nursing, but I think that we are treading on dangerous ground when we come in and try to micromanage the budget, because there are small things in here that I would say, hey, wait a minute, why can't you do this? But I don't think that's our job as a board. I think that we need to trust our administration and that they are accurately doing this, and I've received adequate explanation as to why that cut in nursing is not really a cut in nursing. And so I support the administration and their position on this. The second is, despite what my colleagues have said, I was encouraged to see how many places in the budget that we did see savings from consolidation. And those are not 1 year savings. That's not gone. It's $200,000 for closing Ripton just on the one slide. But that's not $200,000 this year. That's $200,000 this year, next year, the next 10 years. So it's not that they're not there. I'm also encouraged to see that the costs that were advanced by certain people who were against the consolidation didn't materialize. We heard that all of the savings from closing Ripton were going to be eaten up by transportation costs, which turns out not to be true. So I am encouraged by what I saw in the budget, and I was especially encouraged when you look at signs of overall health, that we have backed away from the excess spending threshold, and that was close. I have been here when we were dithering on either side of that excess spending threshold, and we're not there anymore. So congratulations to the administration for doing that. And I do really appreciate conscientiousness around that. So those are the things I wanted to say.
Okay, Ellen.
I think that the way Steve Cash put it is really important regarding school nursing. It's probably not a good way to think about that position as a ratio, because the needs of students as they may come up is not going to be immediately tied to enrollment. So it's not easy to predict and look at numbers and understand what those kiddos need. And similarly, I would say student services is an area of education that is meant to allow for more resources based on what individual kids need. And nursing feels like it falls into that category. So I feel like we should not be cutting any nursing from this budget. And just to do some real rough math, we're within a couple of years of hitting that excess spending threshold. And I don't have any memory of someone arguing that school consolidation costs would get eaten up by transportation. I remember hearing and looking at numbers related to healthcare costs, which continue to go up. And I think that for whatever we save on closing buildings, we are absolutely constantly being driven towards a different cliff. It's not within our control, but within a year or 2 or 3 or 4, all those costs are gone, or all those savings are gone. So we're gonna hit that threshold, and this is a year when we are still cutting positions, and we've consolidated 4 schools into 2, and we're maybe 2 years away from hitting it. So it's gonna happen. I think the whole world could get remade around education and spending and all kinds of things, and I have no interest in trying to predict what's going to happen as far as what the legislature does, but I think what Ron has said resonates for me in the sense that there are members of this school board who absolutely have argued that there is a financial imperative and net savings to be realized in consolidating schools, and that's an unnuanced argument that ignores major cost drivers that we continue to grapple with, that absolutely are going to remain. And kids need more, and they're going to keep needing more. And that's just the cost of education in America today. So some big things are going to have to shift around. We don't have control over a lot of them. But I absolutely think that where we do have control, we should be providing healthcare services to kids in full, recognizing that when they walk in the door, they walk in with everything that they have, and we should try to meet those needs as much as possible.
Yeah. Any questions from those that are online?
I will just say that the threshold moves every year by the rate of inflation. So that's the pace. You know, we're 96% of our capacity to spend now, based on wherever inflation lands year to year. That would be, what we have to maintain in order to stay under. Right.
Which, to Ron's point, a rollover budget is about 6%, right? So, we in order, if we have 4% capacity, and a rollover of 6%, right? We have to use our resources in more efficient ways, just like households do, right? If groceries go up 10% and your salary doesn't go up 10%, then you have to figure out how that's going to work. We have to do the same thing. Some of the things that we're presenting to you are crazy, sounds like crazy ideas that have never been tried before, like a driver and administrative assistants and specialized services and whatnot. And all of those things are designed to help take big costs, try to get good work done, and streamline the use of our dollars. So that's the way that we are trying to stay ahead of that on the operational side. Because there are certainly savings, when you run fewer buildings, it would be impossible to ignore that. However, it's not going to be enough to keep us out of where we are going to get caught in some sort of a state formula that is going to mean that taxation changes at this rate. We have to do all the other pieces as well, and we are working hard to do that. We'll continue to bring you crazy ideas that we hope streamline things and keep services at top level for kids. That's the best that we can do.
Did you have a question?
Yeah. So how do we, I know we're not voting on anything, but let's say we did think that it was important to keep nursing staffing the way it was. How do we communicate, which I do, for a variety of reasons, some of which we talked about today. I found the emails we received compelling, I found the public comment compelling, and I find the overall cost of it to be much smaller than I anticipated. So what would we have to do to make that proposal? Or
go ahead, Mary.
I would suggest that you do like a straw poll.
That's what I was going to suggest as well.
Well, if you'd like to see the budget brought back with the 0.3 nursing put in it, we can certainly do that. We can bring you a budget on the final approval with or without, and you can make a determination from there if you'd like. It shouldn't have a large input on any of the bottom line numbers. Yeah, Ellie looks like she has something.
Okay, Ellie?
I just wanted to say that I'm also very concerned about the nursing thing and would be in support of trying to find a way to look at a budget that had that included.
So, go ahead.
Can I just say one more follow-up
Yes.
to my question?
Yeah.
You know, we did not receive a slew of emails and public comments from art teachers and music teachers and PE teachers. And I don't know what to make. Like the nursing issue was brought to me by folks, you know, and by these folks. And my point stands about the nursing thing. I am curious if, when you were making the budget, if there's an argument. I'm still confused on what the difference is in like affecting of students, but like, is there an argument to not reduce the music teacher by 0.4 that makes sense that we should consider, or is in a similar way, I think the argument has been made about nursing, or is there not that argument out there? I'm trying to like understand, because I don't really have any context for those positions.
The argument, if I think from the framework of a music teacher, and I would certainly invite the principals to chime in, you know, at the elementary level. I think the argument that we made is the expansion of services. For example, we could bring music into pre-K classrooms, you know, both in Mary Hogan and any pre-K classrooms in Shoreham. That's not required by statute in any way. You know, it's done a little bit in Bridport, you know, on some level, but we could do that more substantially. We could also probably think about, paying a music teacher to do some after-school music lessons, you know, if you will.
So all these things would be in addition to what we already have.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, they would.
And what they have today.
Yes.
Okay.
Largely, except for a little bit of pre-K time that, you know, that music or art takes up now. But again, that's not necessarily a requirement, and it's not true throughout the district. So.
Thank you.
So it sounds like folks would like to see kind of a comparison next time to see if in fact we maintain the current FTE level of nursing when we come back together on the 12th.
I mean, can Matt tell us now? Or what does that entail?
I think it would be better for us to, it's about like a $35,000 change, nursing is, but it would be better to make the slide that actually has that amount, right?
Yeah.
So that we're getting all the numbers right and presenting you accurate information, particularly because you have to approve a warning and you have to approve a budget with exact dollars. So let's make sure we get it exactly right.
Okay.
And it would be, for me, it'd be interesting to see how that would be used, because, we have now a consistency across the various different schools for staffing, and how could we use that 0.3 additional, as well.
Yep.
Steve?
You have a point of clarification, if you could. When you say you're cutting that, and everybody's talking about we're cutting nursing services, we are not in fact cutting nursing services. That all schools will receive the current level of nurse access that they are receiving right now. So if we add this back in, we are adding nursing services.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so we're not, that 0.3 or point whatever is not actually cutting access to nurses to any student.
It's a reduction in total FTE,
Yes.
which is different.
Which
And
is
that's why I basically said I'd be interested to see how we'd be using it.
You would be losing the opportunity to reallocate that 0.3 in a different manner that provided more nursing services in other areas of the district.
Right.
Yes. So.
Or Weybridge, for example, who has
between the principals and the nurses, I'm sure a plan could be hatched.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd also really like to see that, because if we're talking about reducing nursing hours but not reducing students, then I feel like there's something I would like to see that mapped out too.
Now, we will be happy to map it out. It does not mean that that's what will actually happen.
Right.
I just want to be clear about that, because it depends on health needs. There are things that happen on the operational level that can reallocate staff, for very, very good reasons, and so we can model that for you. But I wouldn't want to mislead you to say that means that that a nurse is not going to leave a certain school at 1 o'clock every day to go to another school. Right. Just because that is, as you pointed out earlier, it does relate a little bit to student needs. Looks like Ellie's got her hand up again.
Ellie?
Yeah, kind of back to this nursing thing. I would like to see, if we were not going to adopt that 3.3 back into the budget, I would like to hear an explanation about how we're going to address what was brought up in some of the concerns of the nursing staff around when the nurse is not on duty during school hours, even at a different school, how they're going to address the delegation issue. Because my understanding, at least in other settings where I've worked delegated under nurses, is that the nurse delegates the staff to do the med. So it doesn't just work if some other nurse in the district is on, to have that delegation process work. And so that's my concern when I'm thinking about adding in this 0.3 back in, is that the nurse that delegates and oversees those schools is working somewhere in the district when these schools are in operation, so they can be reached by the phone, and there is that access. And I guess if we're not going to have that, I want to know what are we doing for those times when the nurse would not be at work during the school week.
There is no change to the process from when health designees were first allowed, which was actually way back in the day when we couldn't actually find enough school nurses, because of course the pay for nurses who were working in the field in a hospital setting or so on and so forth was far greater than school nursing could be. And so it was way back then that the process of a health designee was started, where you could have somebody who was working inside the school and doing certain services, as I think maybe it was Danny that outlined, that related to some of the basics. And all of that still happens. That happens now. That would happen with the 0.3 reduction. Nothing changes about that. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that is pointed out, and again, I think, and Danny, if you have your testimony in writing, that might be helpful.
And it's also emailed on to the board.
Perfect. So in Danny's testimony, I think she also said, here are the things that don't happen if you have unless you have a registered nurse, So there's specific assessments that can be done, so on and so forth. So we're doing all the things that we can do. And the protocol now would be that, a nurse from another school would be called to come to the closest school, right, to come to the school to handle the circumstances if emergency services was not the 911 call was not the right move to go, depending upon what the acute need was. So that's an imperfect system. However, it is covering the health needs that are known. I also want to say that, one of the things that Hazel just did recently was a wonderful presentation about chronic absenteeism at a state level conference that we had on the subject. So there are certainly advantages to having nursing personnel in school as much as we can have them there, and the administration has no disagreement or argument with that.
And, the 0.3 is not going to put a full-time nurse in every single school.
No,
right?
It will ensure a
and so
half-time
many
nurse
of the
in
gaps
school.
that were so eloquently pointed out is because of that. We don't have a full-time nurse in every single school. Yes, Steve. And then Allie.
I just wanted to clarify so my fellow board members understood me. I do think consolidation can save money in limited spaces. That's why I voted not to have students in Ripton this year, because I think that was the right decision to make. My concern is more the long game, and I'm not sure that using consolidation, we
No.
will be able to stay in front
No.
of these costs.
No.
And so I'm not necessarily interested in the one-off and, you know, how much we can save here or there. It's more looking at the long game and are we playing a game that we can't win is more my concern.
Right.
And-
Because healthcare keeps going up, all these costs keep going up.
Yes, and does that just
Yeah.
outstrip it? And similar to what you said, Wendy, I think you put it pretty well of just, you know, where do those two lines cross and what happens? I don't know. And that's my bigger concern, is to make decisions that we hope are going to stave something off that we really may not be able to, and it's going to have to be sorted out elsewhere then.
And that's where the foundation formula needs to be adequately funded.
Right.
It all comes down to that, based on the educational needs, right, in the future.
So what I'm hearing, tell me if this is not where you are, is that you would like us to bring back a final budget number that includes the 0.3 nurse in it.
Yes, and I still feel like maybe my concern wasn't understood. Is it all right if I explain that now, or?
Sure.
That my okay. The concern is that, like, at the middle school we have a full-time nurse. At the high school we have a full-time nurse. At Mary Hogan we have a full-time nurse. And at the smaller elementary schools we have a nurse that is just a couple nurses now divided among the different schools, but they're working pretty much every single day somewhere in the district. So at any one time, if a kid at Salisbury, even if the nurse isn't there, that nurse is working in another school in the district and would be reachable and available should there be a concern.
Yes.
And that nurse knows that those kids' safety plans and their medical conditions and all this stuff and can respond. So my concern with cutting the nurse that's working at Weybridge and now the Bridport Shoreham is that then that nurse that knows those kids and knows those plans and everything will have days when they're not working in the district at all, when they're off. And that is very concerning.
Yeah, that would not be the case. I don't think, Ellie, I don't think it would work in that way. And also nurses don't necessarily stay in the same school each year. You know, the nurses might change schools. I think this year there obviously have been some changes since Ripton is not running and so on and so forth. So, you know, we would make sure that there is a nurse that knows the kids that is available. I would be very surprised if we were in a situation where that wasn't the case. And even so, our nurses are highly professional and take in health information, expediently. And I have every confidence that any one of them called to a school could do an excellent job with any of our students that needed attention that brought them there. So I just want to reassure you that you know, we have that capacity among our nursing staff, and that's nice for us to. It's a luxury for us.
Okay. So next time, if we could have, you know, the data presented with the 0.3 included, that would be awesome. Ron?
Yeah, I think we have kind of a unique opportunity here, since we have so much of the kind of district staff in the room. If the people who have more experience with Robert rules than I do would weigh in on whether we can kind of take the temperature and ask if anybody wants to comment on kind of the presentation we heard and some of the discussion that we've been having about the FTEs, especially around nursing. Can I do that?
Sure.
Do you know how to do it?
just ask the question.
Well, I can certainly do it. It would be great to, if
Okay.
any of you who are out there, if you have thoughts about any of these things, right? Relative to things that are going on in your building, things that the budget reflects, it would be wonderful to have your 2 cents.
I'm gonna defer to Danny and Hazel to answer I think the point that Ellie is making is accurate and valid. It's a real thing that if that nurse is not the nurse who actually did the training and delegation to the health designee is not present, there's no delegation.
There's no delegation. There's no medicines given. There's no first aid. There's no illness care. The health designee is crippled. They cannot do anything because their delegating nurse is not working that day. And if you're not scheduled to work that day, then you can't delegate. That is what the 11-step delegation tree from our Board of Nursing says we must follow.
Yeah, we're saying the same thing, just 2 different things.
It sounded very different.
It is very different.
Yes, they have to be working, but not in that building at that day.
Exactly.
Correct. But with the 0.3 reduction means that nurse is a day and a half off work that week. So that would leave those 2 schools without a supervising nurse.
Or a different nurse would have to delegate.
We can't, because we did not do the delegation and the training and sign the forms with those health designees. And it would be like having 2 cooks in a kitchen. It becomes an issue. Just like having 2 teachers in a classroom, that they each have their ways of doing things and how they have trained and how they want things worded or done. And it becomes dysfunctional.
I think the other important piece is the safety, like the piece that yes, maybe you have another nurse subbing, and I've oriented all my subs so that they know my students and can then take care of the students as well. But a nurse in a different building has their students that they are already managing their healthcare plans. They're attending their 504 meetings. They're doing all their daily care. And then in addition to that, if you pull that nurse then to also be in charge of all these other nurses, you are spreading this nurse and their abilities across many students and dividing and increasing their risk for safety.
And you're also taking a paid nurse position from allocated budgetary funds from that school building over to another school building who did not have the allocated budgetary funds for a school nurse. Does that make sense?
That's not how it works though.
No, it's done at a district level.
And given that we're bringing the budget back with a 0.3, if we could move away from the nursing conversation and just make sure that the other principals have, that, unless there's some other thing. I mean, I don't want to shortchange other topics, and I know that that's important and there are lots of other conversations to have, but given that the board's given that direction already, unless your pleasure is different, I mean, we've got other 6 how many building principals still left here, so, and Nellie and Courtney, and so it'd be good to give them a chance to talk a little bit too.
And we're happy to answer questions via email and whatnot, because we want to make sure accurate info is given to you on those concerns, and so.
Thank you.
Jen?
I guess I'm just excited about the idea of the instructional specialists at Mary Hogan have made a pretty tremendous impact on learning and instruction this year. And the structures we have, while nascent, are providing embedded professional development for all teachers, all classroom teachers, K-5, at least for an hour every week, which is just if you come in, which you're welcome to do, and see kind of the amount of writing and the math thinking, it's just everywhere. And so this idea of an additional instructional specialist to think about UDL within math, within literacy, but also across settings and with teachers, I think yields great promise for thinking about strengthening tier 1 instruction, but also gives us the flexibility that if our numbers do go up as we predicted they would this summer, we hired an amazing teacher this summer, and we got really lucky because I haven't historically found that to be the case, that like really strong, amazing teachers are available in the summer. So I think that it's like a bit of a nod to flexibility, as well as like this professional development system that's more in line with the rest of the world and how they're doing, like the countries that do well on PISA testing and things like that. So yes, that's a piece of the budget that feels really exciting, as well as thinking about how we might be able to have more flexibility and build Spanish outside of just the classroom with an additional 0.2 Spanish teacher at Mary Hogan right now. Floribeth Jimenez, who teaches Spanish, teaches 6 or 7 sections every single day. And so there's very little opportunity for her to like even connect with her students outside of that class. So that feels really positive as a way to think about building. So, thank you.
Thank you. Caitlin, Jenny?
We've talked a lot about Bridport and Shore recently, so I won't add more, but just that I think LaShawn and I are excited to think about how to use our movement in Spanish teachers to create more opportunity time for kids, and to start thinking about creating that new learning community with the support of this budget. So we're feeling hopeful about that after the break. I'll just echo that the work that school nurses do is really impactful, and I'm really grateful for the ladies that are sitting in front of us. So thank you.
I would say at the high school, we are in active conversation about what it looks like to sort of raise the bar on academic expectations for our students. And there are some investments that target the high school in particular, like a literacy interventionist that meets a need. But I have, as I've watched this budget evolve, have had multiple opportunities to say to my staff, the pipeline is really strengthening, and the investments in learning across all of the sending schools are pretty impressive, and that's all an investment in our work as well. So I appreciate that holistic approach to the budgeting.
Okay.
I was actually going to say something similar to what Caitlin said. One thing that feels really good over the last year, and then thinking about next year, sorry. Is the way that we're able to utilize some new resources and old resources to really think critically around what's happening in K-5 and what that means for curriculum and programming in 6, 7, 8. And then an extension of that, what it looks like when we're transitioning 8th graders to 9th grade. And those have felt like really important conversations that for various reasons we've had a hard time focusing on. And this year we've been able to do that. And this budget continues to allow the capacity for us to really focus on what it means to transition from the PYP to the MYP, and then potentially to DP or not, in a really cohesive way with folks that are really smart and know their content areas really, really well and have the capacity to collaborate. So there's really exciting curricular work that's happening at MUMS this year that this budget in this current year supports, and also for next year that's really important for ACSD students.
Thank you. That's really helpful for me to hear that, because that, for me has been the goal, is if we can strengthen what's happening at K through 5, and pre-K is thrown in there too, that's right. It's just going to be so much better when kiddos get to the MUMS and then they get to the high school. It makes me want to cry, having, subbed at MUMS and all that kind of thing. I think it's awesome. right? And so I'm really pleased to hear what you're saying. And that's why we have an equity-based budget and why the strategic plan was written the way it was. To see those kinds of changes is kind of cool. I mean, it's a lot of work, and yes, it's not going to happen overnight, and we may be frustrated along the way, but that's the intent, to be moving in that direction. So thank you.
Anything else, Courtney or Nellie?
No, I echo / love hearing all of that also.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're trying to move forward with the resources that we have and trying to make best decisions for kids, right?
Yeah. Good. Okay, anything else on the budget? So the next time we talk about it will be on the 12th, right? And at that point in time, will be brought forward, the model with the 0.3 nursing added back in. But the goal that night will be to approve the budget. So if there's something that you need to see, questions, please, this is the time to surface that. So preparation could be made to address that. Otherwise, it's not going to be different than what we've seen tonight, other than the 0.3 nursing.
Career Center.
Oh, and the Career Center will change as well.
And we'll have version 7 and maybe 8
of the
WADM. Yes, so.
We'll make sure we catalog all the adjustments so that we've got a clear understanding of what changes are, and we can, look at them.
Right, but it might be an 8-slide presentation.
Yep. Okay.
Might be a 2-slide.
So I think what we'll do is move forward, and thank you very much. Did you have anything for other?
No.
No, okay, great. Other report of the chair, I'll try to be quick. Just a couple reminders. I know the end of the year is a tough time, but it would be really, really great if folks make sure that they notify myself if it's a board meeting, if you're not going to be able to make it ahead of time. And also, if you're part of a committee, it's really important to notify the committee chair as well. And in that case, it's even more impactful because your presence there may in fact cause it not to be a quorum. So then no work can be done during that committee. So work doesn't come forward. So it's very, very important that folks do just send an email and try to, obviously make the committee meetings as much as you can, because that's where our work is done. That's where the board really influences what's happening in the district. It's really working within the committees, as opposed to here, we're hearing from the committee work, that kind of thing, but the hard work actually happens in the committees, working with the administrative staff, like the budget, right? That was in the in the committees. And so also it'd be useful for me too is if you can let me know if you're going to be remote, then we can avoid things like the last meeting where the meeting was, I needed to make sure that it was extended longer so that we could get back on the Zoom, because now we need 2 links and we only have 1 account. And so you can't have 2 active at the same time. So we lost the other link, so we couldn't get back on again. So if I don't hear from folks, I'm not necessarily going to set up that second link because no one's told me that they were going to be remote, right? So it's really important, to know that as well. The other thing I'd like to point out is, as we're going into really a lot of dialogue with community around budgets, that kind of thing, it's important that we're careful on utilizing like private notes, that kind of thing. And the main reason for that is if you do provide people private notes, it becomes part of the public record, and it could in fact, be called in on any kind of a legal situation, because you've made it part of the public record. So it's the nice thing is if folks are really wanting to point to what's been happening in a meeting is really to point to the recording, because we have a recording. You can tell them exactly where it is, that kind of thing. Because like if I give somebody my notes, it's going to be my bias, and I'm only going to be writing down, what I deemed important to write down, and which could be my bias, right? So it's really important to point people really to the recordings or to the official meeting minutes. But the recordings are out there like instantaneously from MCTV, and even our recordings happen, within a couple days as well. So I just wanted to point that out. Definitely good to talk to folks, all that kind of thing, but I would be really careful with sharing my personal notes. And if this is something that people would be interested, down the road, we could actually have Pietro Lynn give us a little tutorial on that, why we shouldn't do that, and how it could be used, against the district, that kind of thing, or in some kind of a hearing kind of situation, whatever. So the other thing I'd like to point out is that the executive committee, we've created a board self-evaluation form, discuss kind of how we're doing as a board around norms, all that kind of thing. And it also includes our goals as well. And the thought is what we could do is just bring copies of that to the board meetings that happen in January, so that people just fill it out. It's going to be real simple, easy to do, but it's our opportunity. We have these norms that we've established, how well are we doing in fulfilling those norms, and what are our areas for improvement, if there are any, that kind of thing. So those were the couple things that I wanted to bring up. And last but not least is I wanted to ask folks, there is going to be a few positions that are up for re-election. I know there's a couple of folks that have already identified they're not going to run. It would probably be a good idea, and I know this at our annual meeting a couple of years ago, someone requested, well, how do we know what positions are available both at the district level as well as at the board level? And, possibly we put something in the paper so that people know that, oh, there's a seat of it, there's, a couple seats in Middlebury, whatever. I might want to run to be on the board, or maybe I want to be, clerk at the district level, whatever. And I was wondering what folks thought of that. We could, maybe Darcy and I was kind of chatting about it. Maybe we could put something in the paper, just to let people know this is what's available, what's coming up for re-election this year. Just be a little more transparent.
Personally, I think that you can announce what seats are available, but not who's running or who's not going to run. Yeah,
exactly.
That, okay.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's no way, judgment of how anybody in the positions. It's just really letting the community know that these seats are up for re-election.
I know Middlebury does that. They say the town lister, the tree person. They say these are all things that we have to have appointments for. So if you're interested, contact us.
Okay.
So.
Would folks be okay with us doing something like that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Do you know off the top of your head what it is right now for the school board?
I'm not going to do it off the top of my head. I can't remember all the positions. I think there's 4 or 3.
4. I think it's 4.
Yeah.
2 Middlebury and 2. I can't remember which town.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Newport and Salisbury, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this way, because it'd be great if people wanted to run for board, they wanted to run for like clerk at the district level,
Okay.
they wanted to run for the secretary, whatever. Yes.
I think if you do put anything out there with it, it would be important to include the deadline for
Yes.
filing
Yes.
signatures with town clerks.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So that's all that I had there. So let's quickly go to the board committee reports, and we'll start with the communications and engagement.
That's me.
Yay.
So 2 quick things for C&E committee. One is in the board packet. You guys have our current draft for the winter newsletter. Please go over it and then contact me directly if you have any suggestions for edits or if we got anything not quite right. Please get me your updates by the end of this calendar year, since we will be hoping to send it out once school resumes after break. Second thing just to make note of is because of the craziness of December, we did not have a school board town hall this month. We are doubling up next month, and current dates are going to be Shoreham on Wednesday, January 7th at 6 p.m. at Shoreham Elementary School, and Salisbury on Thursday, January 15th at 6 p.m. at Salisbury Elementary School. And anyone in the district is invited to come to any of those meetings. That's it for us.
Can you say the Shoreham date again? Did you say the 11th or the 7th?
Yep. Shoreham is the 7th.
Got it.
7, lucky number 7. And Salisbury's the 15th.
And what times again are you meeting?
Both of them are at 6 p.m.
Okay. Any questions? Next up is finance.
Finance Committee, you would have seen the work for tonight. So I'll just jump to facilities. The Facilities Committee met last week and had a retreat where we reviewed an initial sort of 5-year plan in the capital improvement process. Our hope is to bring that something before the board on January 5th if the executive committee deems it appropriate. So that's it. Questions?
So Jason mentioned the 5th, so that's kind of like one of my other things on my reminder list. Right now, we did target January 5th to be a special board meeting. So the thought now is that it would focus on the construction improvement plan. And that would be really the only topic, agenda item that would be associated with it. Okay, policy. Jason.
I'm Jamie.
Oh, God.
I was Jason this morning from the meeting.
Yeah, I'm tired. Sorry, Jamie.
No, it's okay. The policy committee has been meeting. We are razor close to coming up with a revised C30 policy, which I mean, no one's more excited about it than I am. But we're meeting tomorrow afternoon, and that will be important to discuss with the full board. And tonight we want to bring. Can I do this thing about 823?
Yes, please.
We have a. Is it the first read?
No.
Second read. Sorry. Second read on 823, community engagement and vision policy. It's not changed in a long time. Laura, do you want to say anything about it that you haven't already said?
We
Laura wrote it.
updated it. I wrote it or rewrote it based on the retreat principles, and we talked about it.
Right.
We
You haven't
revised it.
updated it since a long time.
Yeah, it had been years. And we updated it to reflect what we had talked about in our last board retreat, and then workshopped it slightly in committee, and then brought it to you all, and it has been languishing in first read status.
Yeah, you had first read, so now you're ready for second read. There
Right.
have been no changes since second read.
Yes.
Right.
And this was supposed to have been approved. We were supposed to take action last board meeting, but it didn't get included in the meeting materials. So I decided to wait until tonight so that you had a copy of it. So, my bad. So, we can take action on it, so is there a motion?
Move to pass policy A23, is that the right number?
Second.
And Jamie's, see, I said Jamie. Jamie seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of adopting A23, our policy A23, which is community engagement and vision, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Yay, finally.
And I think, so we have the meeting on the 5th is that a normal board meeting?
No.
It's
No,
a special
right.
board.
Okay, so then the next normal board meeting would
It's
be
the 12th.
would be the 12th.
Yep.
So I think it's likely that we will have a C30 first read
Okay,
on
Excellent.
January 12th. Just as a
just keep us posted
Yeah.
so that we
Okay.
include it.
Thank you.
Says it, it's true.
Okay, next, negotiations.
The negotiations committee today met again with the ESP representatives, and we will be, negotiations are continuing. We'll be meeting again January 6th, and then meeting with the association again on the 20th. So, negotiations are proceeding.
Great, thank you. Student Outcomes Committee, Ellen.
Student Outcomes Committee met a couple of weeks ago, and actually Nellie and I are meeting tomorrow to kind of work through a final work plan that we've put together for different presentations, some of which are already scheduled, some of which we would come to the executive committee and ask to make time for over the course of the year to report out on different measures of student outcomes. So it was a good conversation. We're still sort of finalizing the focus areas, but it's going well.
Would it be useful if I sent you the our work plan and then you could?
Yes, yes, and I think that what we've talked about probably is already in there, but yes, that would be great.
Yeah, so let me just forward the work plan so that you could mark that up. That would be awesome.
Thanks, Barb.
Yes. Addison Central CPAC. Oh, I skipped over Hannaford Career Center. I'm sorry. Is there anything additional there?
You talked about the work plan. Could you send me a copy of that too? Because we're trying to develop one for the Career Center as well.
Sure.
That would be helpful.
Was there anything on more on Hannaford Career Center? I skipped over that.
No. Nicole gave
Okay, great.
spoke for us.
Yes. And next is our CPAC.
Yeah, I have not heard anything from Jen or Mary since they held the parent-only meeting. So, to be determined. I don't believe there's anything scheduled on the calendar right now.
Okay. And I'm not sure Suzanne is.
She's not online.
She's not online, so we'll just go over the VSBA update. We'll just skip over that. And Middlebury Community TV, I don't really have anything new that from what I had presented last time. The main thing was that it's now included as a portion in our budget.
Yeah.
And we saw that. And that is it. This brings us to our second public comment period. Is there any, the audience is left. Is there anyone online as an attendee still that would like to make a public comment? If so, raise your Zoom hand. Seeing none. Okay, then we'll move on to board reflections. And this is, if anyone has anything that they would like to reflect on, I really want to thank everyone for their hard work. That's been, the last few months have been pretty intense with everything that's happening. And of course, it's taken us all the way through budget. So we're not off the hook yet, but folks, I really appreciate it. I hope you have wonderful holidays with your family and, can take a few days off and rest a little bit and just enjoy folks. So that's what I would like to share. Mary, Heather?
I just want to again express appreciation for Matt and Wendy making themselves available for the training this morning, and thanks to the board members who showed up for that and asked questions. I think it probably helped refine the presentation a little bit, as well as hopefully provide some additional information. So thanks to all.
Just add a thanks for the recording of that for those of us who couldn't make it this morning.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Oh, no, I was going to echo what Mary Heather said, and a special shout out to Matt and Wendy for all the work that's gone into the budget, because that has been, I know how much work that is, and really appreciate the fact that they're dealing with such a wide open, I mean, it's not as bad as it's been in other years, but we still don't have everything from the state, and we still don't have, it's like driving a $52 million bus with no windows, so.
Yeah. Well, we benefited greatly from the finance committee and guests. That particularly our last session was extremely helpful in being able to really refine a lot of complexity in a single budget year into places where we could talk about it in as reasonable a way as we could. So thank you to the members of the finance committee for their work.
Anyone else? Yes.
If you didn't get a chance to see the 10th graders IB projects,
oh, I know.
It was recorded.
Thank you.
And it's up now.
Thank you.
It's some kids make robots, I'm just saying.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. If nothing else, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.